Today's session, we are going to be talking about inclusion of children with a disability, delay, and difference. And this has been a culmination of work that I've been working towards in my career in early childhood education. And I've worked through over 10 years in early childhood as a ECT and USH educator, an ed leader, and a director, and now working specifically in inclusion and early intervention. Thank you, Ben, for our acknowledgement to country. I am on the Dharawal country in Wollongong, New South Wales on the south coast. And it's south coast of New South Wales. And it's wonderful to be able to see spring coming and the flower buds and the new growth as I walk through our beaches, foreshores, and see nature and country come to life. So it's wonderful to see spring, and it's my favorite time of the year. A little bit about me. I am an early childhood teacher, and thank you, Ramesh and Ben, for the introduction. And I'm representing two organisations today. Firstly, Reimagine Australia, that I am a consultant, early intervention consultant with, and my own consultancy, Inclusive Collective. So before we get started, we just wanted to discuss what creates inclusion. And Early Childhood Australia's statement of inclusion in 2016 stated that inclusion ensures all children participate meaningfully while learning and interacting in programs that acknowledge each child's strengths and interests so that they are supported to be active members of their community. I really like this definition of inclusion because inclusion encompasses a lot of things. And for this session, we'll be talking about disability, delay, and difference. But I really like that inclusion focuses on children's participating meaningfully while learning and interacting in programs. So meaningfully means what's meaningful for the child, for their own context, for their families, as well as the learning environment and the community context. The other thing I like to acknowledge, and this does come natural to us as early childhood educators and teachers, we focus on children's strengths and interests. And that's the core foundation of inclusion, that we acknowledge children's strengths, their interests, and we embed that in our programs. Inclusion has three dimensions, and it is access, participation, and outcomes. So we have access. Access is access into early childhood services, access into programs, access into curriculum areas, and access to resources. Yes, sometimes access can be difficult for our children who have disability, delay, or difference, but that's the thing that we need to be advocating for. There is always services we come across that are always advocating for access, but just need a little bit more support. And that's where we talk about participation. And this is the meaningfully participating in programs and learning in our services, in our curriculums. And the last one's outcomes. And we look at the early years learning framework outcomes, and the new version of the EYLF has really incorporated early intervention, trauma-informed practice, neuroaffirming practice, and more detail from the research of inclusion. But we also need to continue going back to child developmental outcomes, child developmental milestones, and seeing where those children are progressing and moving throughout their milestones. And I like to call them ages and stages. And let's go back to refer those into our documentation and planning as well. Before we get started into our professional development, I just love to bring forth strength-based terminology as a focus for our ongoing professional development and conversations in inclusion. We need to be mindful that terminology does change all the time, and I'm in a vast array of communities and groups that are advocating for inclusive terminology. So the first one I would like to discuss is obsessed with versus passionate about. So when we're talking about children and we're talking about children who have a disability, delay, or difference, we may be able to maybe discussing with families or other educators, the child is obsessed with trains versus we should be discussing with our peers and our families, children are passionate about. We just want to have that more positive annotation to our terminology. Similar to rigid versus prefers consistency. Rigid behavior, rigid interests has that negative connotation, whereas prefers consistency provides that positive affirmation for that child. The other one has severe meltdowns versus feels emotions intensely. This is a controversial one because meltdowns and severe meltdowns does come from that allied health lens, and that is the some of the observations and feedback we give to allied health professionals when we're looking at diagnoses or further funding supports. But when we want to express and talk about that child, they're feeling emotions intensely because they are overwhelmed or because they're angry about blah. They are feeling intensely emotions about sadness because they're unable to understand what's happening in the next routine or the next transition. The other one is non-verbal versus non-speaking. So the neurodiverse community, the neurodivergent community, are both discussing these terminologies, so non-verbal and non-speaking. This is a terminology that when we work with families who are working with children who are neurodiverse, may prefer the non-speaking term or the non-verbal term. The non-verbal term does allude to just being the verbal, the language, whereas non-speaking can just be the non-speaking, sorry, can be their like physical behaviors as well. They can discuss, they can present through body language and facial expressions. Our second last one is low and high functioning versus require supports with. So I still hear, and I tend to fall into this category a lot as well, is when I say this child's a low functioning or high functioning, relating to their diagnosis in particular. Whereas low and high functioning is all of us, right? We've all worked a 5-day week, or we've done lots of things throughout our week, Monday to Friday, and now we're here on a Saturday doing this professional development. We may be low functioning today after a full-time work week. Same with me. I am not a morning person. I am low functioning in the morning, and then I have 5 coffees or go for a run or get out in the sunshine, and then I become high functioning. Whereas our children can't be labeled low or high functioning holistically across who they are as a person. And these children will feel that label. And then we need to be understanding that they will then that will affect their mental health, and that will affect the way they feel about themselves and where the community and their teachers and educators interact with them. So let's remove those high and low functioning labels, because we are all low and high functioning at different points of our days and different points of our lives. So we want to talk about this child requires supports with seeking sensory toys during group time, requiring additional support and awareness when there's a transition. And the last one is a lesson I've learned previously about the puzzle piece versus the infinity symbol for the neurodiverse, particularly the autism community. So prior to the infinity symbol, there was the puzzle piece as a logo, and the community still focus on that puzzle piece as a logo, but a lot of autistic community members feel that the puzzle piece is like there's a piece missing, or they are always finding a piece to complete that puzzle. Whereas an infinity symbol is we're ongoing, we're learning, we're lifelong learners, and we're part of this community. So that's something I've learned. I created a neurodiverse social group within my early intervention programs and had the puzzle piece as a logo, and families gave me feedback, and that's something I'm learning ongoing as well. Another aspect to today's presentation is some guiding terms. I've been using the words and terms neurodiversity, neuroaffirming, trauma-informed approaches, and I'll also be speaking on the social model of disability. So neurodiversity is a term that has been used more common this year, and it's been brought forth into our early childhood education and care sector over the last 2 or 3 years. And so neurodiversity refers to the variety of ways that people's brains can work. It recognizes that brain differences like those seen in autism, ADHD, and other differences, and they exist and they should be respected. Similar to neuroaffirming means supporting and accepting people's unique neurological differences. It involves creating positive and inclusive environments that recognize and value different ways of thinking and behaving. And the theme for my session today is about neuroaffirming practice. I truly believe, and this is now my new teaching philosophy, is if we're applying neuroaffirming practice, we're inclusive for all children. Thirdly, we have trauma-informed approaches, and trauma-informed approaches are methods of understanding and supporting people who have experienced trauma by creating environments that ensure safety, trustworthiness, choice, collaboration, and empowerment to help them heal and thrive without re-traumatization. And so our approaches into our practice and into our teaching strategies and our curriculum approaches should ensure that we have trauma-informed approaches in our practice, allowing children to feel safe, allowing children to feel trusted, have choice, have collaboration and empowerment. And we do that in our strength-based approach and our play-based pedagogies anyway. So that's just adding a whole nother layer into our ability to support children who have come from complex backgrounds. And lastly, social model of disability. So we are always moving towards social model of disability. And at Reimagine Australia, this is something we advocate for in our advocacy to government, NDIA, inclusion support funding in education as well. So the social model of disability views disabilities, developmental delays, differences, and neurodivergence because of how society is organized rather than a person's different abilities. It focuses on removing barriers and creating more accessible and inclusive environments. So we're not changing or curing or treating the child, we're changing our approaches, our communication styles, our environments to support the child to feel included in the space. So taking the terminology and the guiding terms, we're going to move forward with a case study. So for the rest of the session, I would like to introduce you to Sam. Sam is a child that I've taught, and I'm using examples from different children to make this case study. Sam is, this is just a photo from Canva. There's no confidentiality breaches here. This is just taking bits and bobs from different children. So Sam is male. He's 4 years old. He has level 3 autism spectrum disorder, but we want to ensure that all children who have this diagnosis are different and are individuals. So please note that this diagnosis is not going to be the same for every child you come across in your services. Sam sometimes feels overwhelmed by too much sensory input, which can increase during transitions throughout the day. Sam finds being in a group of children challenging, particularly in group times. Sam enjoys stimming behaviors. This includes visual stimming, spinning, and twirling throughout the day. And I want to bring forth the term stimming behaviors. And this is the definition for this is a repetitive action or movement of the body, including making noises. Stimming does not need to be addressed unless it's somehow hurtful for the individual or others in the room. Stimming serves as a purpose for Sam. Either that's for joy, for engagement, for regulation, or be able to work through those transition difficulties as well. So as I go through, have this model of Sam in your brain. You may have a similar Sam in your service or your context, and just keep thinking through and reflecting through the different layers of this inclusion session. For Sam, I want to ensure that I bring forth this message of view through the lens of differences, not deficits. We're not looking at Sam who has deficits, he has differences. So we have Sam at the top image. He's lining up his cars on the lounge. He's having alone time. Sam is a hands-on learner. Sam enjoys using headphones when he's playing. He may use headphones for noise. He may use headphones for compression on his ears. He may use headphones as that's his comfort toy or resource. He may use headphones for that stimming behavior, but he enjoys using them when he is playing. And STEM expresses joy by spinning objects. So the words we use are advocating for STEM, advocating for the way he is being in the learning environment. When we look at joys and interests, and I like to call this neurodiverse joy or neuroaffirming joy. Traditionally, neurodiverse children's joys, interests, and comfort items have been restricted in education settings. That's a bold statement, but usually their favorite toys and activities are kept away to use as reinforcers for work. So first activity, then you can play your dinosaurs. It's that first and then visual that is like a box. While this has mostly been done with good intention to motivate children to complete the tasks we would like in our settings, for our curriculum, for our Father's Day crafts, for whatever is required in the service. The reality is that these joys, interests, and comforts are withheld from the children. This has an effect on motivation and relationships. Relationship is an environment, our curriculum, as well as the indoor-outdoor environment. For our neurodivergent children, this can teach them compliance for compliance sake, not engagement. In other words, you tell me what to do and I have to do it, or I don't get something I need or love. It becomes transactional. It's not relationship. It's not that intrinsic motivation. It's that extrinsic motivation. Comfort items are very important for our children to help them feel safe, happy, and calm. It can cause intense stress to withhold access to these regulatory items for children who come into our service. Cardin's research in 1996 showed that rewards like prizes and reward charts decrease response rates by weakening the intrinsic motivation. This means that rewards actually aren't long-term success motivators. The same study also found that praise increased response rates by increasing intrinsic motivation. So I want to preface that a connection is more important than tangible rewards. If the one thing you take away from this presentation today is relationships that are predictable, consistent to our children are the main goal that you should be having with our children, because that's once you have a relationship, you are then able to understand them, see those micro needs or goals or interests that you can then extend on and support them in your service. So we want to get to know Sam. Once Sam has now been enrolled into our service, we need to acknowledge that enrollment does not equal inclusion. Enrollment into the service is just having access to the physical building or the access to educators. We then have a layer of additional support that needs to include the child. So this is firstly building relationships, which I've discussed with Sam and his families. We need to have an extended period of time where we're observing Sam using a wide range of styles. Where is his go-to areas in the learning environment? What is his go-to resources that he's always moving towards? Where is he during the day? So you could do a timestamp. You could do a timestamp of seeing where he is, mapping out the learning environment. I like to have the map of the service, and I like to time stamp where he sits and plays and engages. And some children I work with, and I still work with children like Sam throughout the week, will tend to be in the opposite area where the group of children are based. So if everyone's outside, Sam will want to go inside. And then once everyone's inside, Sam will want to go outside. So we need to understand these routines, these movements, these engagement that Sam is having. Next is discussion with the team. We want to ensure that we're sharing success and concerns that we have with the entire team. This is something I've learned as an early childhood teacher who was an inclusion support educator that moved into education leadership and directing, that all of us in the team are responsible for Sam, not just the focus teacher, not just the inclusion support educator. All of us are working with Sam. Yes, some of you may have a natural connection with Sam. You may have that strong relationship with Sam. So they will be the key people in his, I like to call that the care team. The care team is his therapist, his family, the director and his relational educators, but we need to keep the rest of the team all on board. We need to be acknowledging his strengths and empowering Sam with his strengths. What is he engaging in? What is he enjoying? Remember the importance of intensity, frequency, and duration of Sam's behaviors. This doesn't have to be complex behaviors, or in other terms, challenging behaviors, which I don't like the term. It's complex behaviors. And we need to be looking at how intense his behavior is. Is there intensity of anxiety? Is there intensity of anger? Is there intensity of emotion? How frequent is it happening? Is it happening every hour? Is it happening every time this educator goes on their break? Is it happening on a Thursday when dad drops off, when normally mum drops off every morning? And how long is it happening for? Does it get longer of an afternoon when he's getting more tired? Or is it longer in the morning? Those are the key documentation categories, just in a notepad or in a table, like an ABC chart, to document those behaviors. Also reflect on educators' perspectives of these behaviors. Each of us come to the team with past experiences, I'm going to say exposures to different diagnoses. Some of us have never been with a child who has some form of disability, delay, or difference, where others have. And so that behavior that Sam is having might be scary for that educator. So we need to be reflecting and having those professional conversations with our educators to understand these behaviors. Being aware of Sam's learning style. All our children who come into us have different learning styles, and so do us, and so understanding that as well. And transition lays the foundation of ongoing inclusion. So always looking at transitions throughout our day. So how do we embrace interests? So we have sharing enjoyment with Sam, incorporating interests, educating peers, talking about his interests, and honoring the value. So when we look at sharing enjoyment, engage in the activities and hobbies your child truly loves, even if they aren't considered traditional. So for example, I can picture a child in my mind that I was working with who was in the home corner and was lining up the fruit and vegetables. They weren't actually engaging in dramatic play, cooking and creating cakes and that mums and dads dramatic play. They were using the toys and categorizing them in size order and color order. And so we need to go into that play knowing that they're enjoying that categorization, and we don't have to force them into that dramatic play experience, as an example. Instead of limiting access to interests, let's integrate them into the learning, which we do well in our sector. Educating peers, teach our neurotypical peers about neurodivergent special interests. Explain that some people can learn their interests so much that they learn every single thing about that interest, and that's amazing. Talk about it. Encourage your student to talk about or share their interests regularly without judgment. Go into the conversation knowing that they're going to unpack every little detail about their interests. It's okay if they aren't ready to try something new or different yet. And acknowledge that interest can be deeply comforting and meaningful to that child. Children will revert back to that interest in times of stress, in times of dysregulation, in times of unaware of what the next expectation is in the environment. So when we're looking at our individual education plans or individual support plans or behavior plans, depending on what you call them, for this session, I'm going to call them IEPs, individual education plans. And from a neuroaffirming lens, IEPs are really working towards the big picture of the child's life. To do this, we need to collaborate with the child and have their voice. And it may not be their verbal voice or their speaking voice. It could be your observations of where they are drawn to, where they thrive and their strengths are, what their interests are, what are their favorite resource or educator, and their family. We're bringing this family context in as well. Take time to ask what goal areas are important to the family and to the child, not what is easier for us. Our routines, our programming, our learning environments, we do have a whole gamut of children and expectations, and our plates are overflowing. But if we look at supporting the child and where they're at and what they need, that's when you're going to see the gold, or the really great development in children as they feel comfortable and warm and connected in their environment. And then what are the child's long-term goals, and what are the family's long-term goals? They are with you for such a short time in their life. We should be upskilling that family so they can continue advocating for that child throughout early childhood, primary school, high school, tertiary, and moving forward. Remember that neuro-affirming education respects the child's identity and autonomy, views differences as strengths, not deficits, and considers individuals' joys, interests, and strengths. Neuroaffirming IEP goals also do the same for this. Goals should help the child thrive and never ask the child to be or act neurotypical. This means that neurodiverse affirming goals embrace using accommodations and modifications in the environment, adding different resources, adding different layers to the transitions, adding different communication styles. We need to factor in our executive functioning, scaffolds, and supports, getting and supporting the child to plan ahead. What's going to happen in this particular routine? What's going to happen in this transition? Consider the child's interests and opinions. Where do they want to go and what do they want to do? That's their autonomy. Consider and support sensory emotional needs. I want to advocate for the sensory well-being of a child. We look at emotional and social well-being, but the sensory world, their sensory being, and that's a whole nother session on their sensory world and their sensory profile. Embracing neurodivergent communication styles. They have different communication styles, and we need to be unpacking those and talking with the family about that. View the child as a whole and complete person, not just their diagnoses. I know that I previously would tend to just go, Sam with autism, and I need to do these strategies because he's got autism. But then I would get engaged with the other children in a particular other way. I need to keep holding that back and including all children. Foster positive self-identity, foster self-advocacy. We want this child to advocate for themselves and what they need, whether they're non-speaking, they're non-verbal, they are verbal. We need to encourage them to be able to say, no, I don't want to do that, or no, I can't do that. I need help. I'm really hungry right now. And again, wherever possible, include the child's voice and wishes. Now let's look at play. When it's playtime, let's consider if the activity is actually play or is it work for the child. Each of us have our go-to play experiences, the things that we enjoy and love, and those are the times where the world escapes us. Those are the times where we lose track of time. Or work. Work can be we're looking at the time regularly going, when is this finished? This is hard for me. Is the child enjoying the play, or are they forced to do it? And it doesn't mean like restraint, but are they encouraged gradually to keep going back to that experience? Are they free to play as they see fit with the resource? And the reason why I put the number picture on here is I have a child that communicates through numbers, and they are able to communicate by using numbers in a way that, for example, Woolworths has 25 aisles. So he'll say, I want to go to 25. And so for him, he categorizes Woolworths as 25, whereas Bunnings is 62. And the preschool room is 1, but the baby's room is 3. And so understanding that numbers is their form of communication and play. Let children choose what to play with. It might be the fringe of a rug or the lid of a container. I have a permanent marker here that I'm just fidgeting with because that's helping me regulate and then still keep engaging in this presentation. Allow the play to be repetitive. We sometimes have the urge to push children to play different games. Remember that consistency can be comforting and enjoyable. Include new choices for play, but let the child select when that is possible. Let's have the Play-Doh table at the front door as they walk into the preschool room every morning, so we know that that's going to be there when they arrive. But then the table next to it could have a different experience that they're doing on a day or fortnightly or monthly basis. Play strategies. So I'm going to give 6 play strategies of working in an inclusion lens or a neuroaffirming lens. And so firstly is comment or narrate. Talk about your child, your child, what your child is doing. Describe what you see. The car is driving, broom, broom, broom. They are able to then see that you're engaging in that interest. You don't have to be there with them, but you're able to do that in a verbal way. Again, if children have this have hearing sensitivity or auditory sensitivity, this may not be the best strategy for you, but you could parallel play alongside them. Second is follow the lead. Mimic what they do, but use your own toy or item instead. So I will be there, I will follow, and that's when they start to realize, oh, you get what I'm playing. You get that I'm categorizing the home corner resources. You understand that I want to line these up and that helps me regulate. You understand that I like these textures. Those micro interests or those micro little leads that they'll see, they'll look at you and wait. And then you do the next activity and you'll see that slowly progress into a really great relationship in the service. When you have the time and you have the ability and you feel you've got that connection, make the small adjustments. Do something slightly different from the child. See if they notice and try it too. If they don't notice, that's okay. So for example, in the photo where there's blocks, I might build the block tower on the lounge behind me. And the child goes, oh no, the blocks have to stay on the floor and that's where I want them. And over time, I might put one block on the chair, one block on the floor. And so you're just adapting and making small adjustments to see what their flexible thinking and their executive functioning is like. Number 4, go easy on sharing. Play alongside a peer without forcing to share. Allow the child to interact if they want to. 5, make it clear. Select games with very clear instructions or visual aids to illustrate the directions of the play. Children thrive off those really clear instructions, what's next and what's happening, and that will comfort them. So they may go to this resource regularly to regulate or support their understanding of the transition, or when they're needing support from another educator. Again, respect interests is our 6th one. I like to use the analogy of a toolbox. Each of us come to our services with our own toolbox of strategies, professional development, our own lived experience. But we need to understand that these toolboxes can get rusty, they can get old, they need upgrading. And so as we replace toys through professional conversations, professional development, we can be upgrading our resources and our tools regularly. And each of our teams have different sized toolboxes, different style and brands of toolboxes. And so we should be sharing our toolboxes and strategies. And so we have to come to each day, each scenario we are with a child and pull different strategies from those toolboxes. You may do a professional development experience on supporting autism, and then you do one with supporting ADHD. And each of those will have different strategies, and each child will respond to those different strategies differently and differently on different days as well. Strategies for Sam. I love to keep referring back to the sensory diet or a brain break with our children. Yes, occupational therapists can do a sensory profile and see what the sensory needs are for a child. But if we just look at our senses and what sensory experiences children can engage in, and do that throughout the day. So I like this template by Harkler. Harkler is a podcast and their OT occupational therapy website that provides these resources, free resources. So you look at a daily activity. What is the daily activity? Is it a transition to meal times? Is it transition outside? Is it morning pickup or drop off? What are the challenges the child's having? What are the sensory activities we could provide? Do we provide a fidget toy? Do we provide an obstacle course before our morning group time? And was it helpful? Sometimes it is helpful, sometimes it isn't. That's okay, but that's our critical reflection. And if Sam has a meltdown or just seems overwhelmed, firstly check for safety. Safety of others, safety for Sam, safety for yourself. Check where your own well-being and your own approach to Sam, because we want to come to Sam with a very calm, regulated state. And if you're not regulated in that moment, you may heighten him more. And it's okay to tap out with another educator to then support Sam. Be reassuring, provide space, sit parallel, get to their eye level, try to tone things down, turn the lights off, reduce the noise input, reduce the visual stimulations, reduce the physical senses. Is he wearing a jumper and is too overwhelmed? Take his shoes and socks off to just help regulate his body temperature. Does he need to eat? I know for me, I get hangry and I will need to eat some food, and that helps me regulate as well. Or does he need some water? And then start to re-engage when possible in his favorite resources and his interests. So my final slide is just some go-to resources, and I'm sure some of you have seen some of these before. I always refer back to the developmental milestones from the EYLF and National Quality Standards. Go back to those and see where development, and each child will develop differently on the developmental domains. Secondly, Reimagine Australia have a free app called Thrivery, and this is a ages and stages app. It's also a communication and goal setting app for families and for educators and practitioners. This app allows you to have the therapist, the family, and yourselves on one platform that you can communicate all what you're working on, and you're able to be on the same page. The family is able to advocate on a daily basis. There's also a diary for documentation. There's further reading for different supports for families and educators as well. So feel free to download that. That's free. The next one is Inclusion Together resource. So this used to be called the Working Together Agreement, and this is a new and improved resource by KU Children's Services, and it's a map for working better together for allied health, families, educators. And so go look at that resource page, and there's some wonderful videos and extra resources there. And the other one is the Australian Education Research Organisation, AERO, and they have a great evidence-based resource about learning trajectories. And so this talks about the trajectories of each learning area and in our developmental domains. They look at executive functioning, they look at working memory, they look at joint attention. And so you can go to those and see what are the stages of those learning trajectories. So it's not focused on ages or stages, it's looking at those learning trajectories for children. So I gave you a lot of information there, and hopefully you've taken some information away from for your own professional development in your services. And just remember, everything is possible for your own learning and development, and we're here to support children. So thank you so much for your time today, and it was an honor to be speaking at this event, and thank you so much for all of you being involved in this organization. I can see myself back when I was a student being an ECT and going, this is something I was seeking regularly. So my email is there. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions or feedback, and we can have conversations ongoing as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Blake. I think I'm speaking on behalf of all the 95 participants and all those who could not make it today. Thank you for letting us record this session, because I feel like people will be using this as a constant resources, going back to it and using it in their own workplace, because it's filled with such hands-on learning. And I genuinely hope that all the languages that you have used today, it becomes a common practice in early childhood services, especially when talking to children or talking about children, because it's so important. Thank you so much for your expertise and insights. Your passion for inclusion and early childhood intervention is truly inspiring. We are so grateful to have you as one of our speakers, Blake.
Thank you for having me.
such a great session, and I'm glad that there will be recording available. You can also contact Blake on the email that he has provided, but it will also be some points of discussion during our panel. I really hope that we can get Blake to speak in future events as well. He is awesome. He's incredible. And from all the whole team of Thriving as Male Educators and all the participants, we wish your dad a happy birthday. Now, it's time to welcome our next speaker, and he is a legend in early childhood education and care. He's a sector leader. I don't think I'll be wrong if I call him a celebrity because everybody knows him. Um, he's Anthony Saman, and he will be doing a session on leadership is about more than one. He is truly an agent of change. He started as an early childhood teacher in a long day care, but he has built a deep understanding of pedagogical practices and the importance of fostering strong relationship. He is a great advocate of equity and social justice, and he was also awarded the ECA Advocate of the Year. He has been a constant supporter and contributor for our group, and he also made a lot of great suggestions and recommendations while we were organizing this event, while we were designing this designing logo for our group. So I am very, very grateful for Anthony. Let me welcome, please join me in welcoming Anthony for his session, everyone.
Thank you so much, Ramesh, and thank you all for having me here today. And apologies, I can't stay all day. I'm juggling 2 conferences today, but I'm really honoured to be here. Now, I'll just, Blake, thanks so much for that presentation. It was awesome. I really enjoyed that. I'll just see if I could share my screen. Bear with me. I'm hoping I can. Is that what I press? No. You need to get permission to share your screen, it says. So perhaps someone can give me some permission to share my screen.
Anthony, I'll find you on the list and I'll get that sorted for you.
Okay, thank you. While we're doing that, I just want to acknowledge that I'm zooming in currently from Dharawal country. My feet are firmly placed in Gadigal country, which you might know on a colonial map as the city of Sydney. Acknowledgement of country is critical, but we always have to pause and say, and now what? What can we do about it? Because acknowledgement of country does not have a huge impact, may I say, on the death rates of Aboriginal children and families. And I was reminded of this when there we go, my mic was muted. Arnie, Denise and I, can you all hear me now? Yep, great. Arnie, Denise and I were presenting a paper at a conference following a book chapter that I had written with her, Professor Karen Martin. And just before we were about to go on stage, Arnie Denise started crying and just asked why she was crying. And my ego took over and I thought it's because we're presenting together. And she said, I'm not crying for that. And I said, why are you crying? She said, because I turned 50. And my response was, babes, we can get Botox this afternoon. You don't have to cry. And she said, that's not why I'm crying. And I said, what's happened? She goes, I'm the first woman in my family to turn 50. I have to start planning my funeral tonight. Now, this is the effect of colonisation. And so when we say we acknowledge country, one of the things elders have taught me is then you have to say, and now what? What are you going to do about it? And we should never underestimate the power of what we do, because I can guarantee for many of us on the screen, the 3-year-olds, the 4-year-olds, the 5-year-olds you work with right now know a lot more about Aboriginal culture and history than we did when we were in high school. And that's the power of education. As Spodek said, it's always an intervention in the lives of children. So I'll share my screen. Let me see if that's going to allow me. No, let me just see if something's going to pop up. Okay. I'm going to try again. Sorry, it might be my issue. Oh, it's going to ask me to quit Teams and come back on. What should I do? Should I just quit and come back in like 30 seconds?
Yeah, that would be great, Anthony.
Okay.
Failing that, you can send
Give
it to
me
me and
one-
I'll
okay.
share it for you.
Just give me 1 sec and I'll.
Sorry about the hiccups, guys. Technical hiccups.
This is life.
That's all right. I had the same in my introduction, but we got through.
There's always some little hiccup.
This
Might
is the
try.
part where we need someone to do a tap dance.
I might try calling him in. Oh no, he's back.
I'm back now.
Yep, there.
Okay, let me see if I can share my screen now. Yes, I can.
Fantastic.
Okay, fantastic. And I'm just going to double check that if I may, can you see my PowerPoint slide now, Michelle?
Yes, we can.
Amazing. Thank you for your
Perfect.
assistance. Okay, superb. Thank you all. Okay, so I am acknowledging the country that I'm on at the moment. So let's just anchor with some ideas if we can. And for many of you know that leadership is a real passion that I have. And I just want to anchor this by just giving you some ideas before we move into some thinking around this particular topic. How you show up every day absolutely has an impact on the people around you as an educator. And it's really critical that as educators of young children, we do one thing, and we do many things, but one of the things a dear colleague of mine, Janet Robertson, said is to keep yourself relevant and engaging. Always hunt for ideas as an early childhood person. The world is full of such rich information. It's normal to feel daunted by the things around us, but in thinking about that, we always have to resist this idea of trying to be a superhero, because that's not what we show up to be. So just to think for a moment and remember, not all managers are leaders, and not all leaders are actually managers. To be a leader means to have influence. And I invite you all to think about the kind of influence you want to have in the place you work in. Because if you know the kind of person you want to be, then how to behave will fall into place. I think too often what can tend to happen to us is that we unconsciously live our lives. We unconsciously become these educators, and we look back and we think, wow, how did I end up here? What happened here? When we're really intentional about how we show up as male educators, then we can have that benefit of the ripple effect we have on the people around us. So my question to you essentially is, what kind of wake do you want to leave on the people around you? What kind of wake do you want to leave behind? And what does your wake look like? Now, there are many definitions for this idea of wake. Wake can mean, did you wake up this morning? Wake can mean someone passed away. Are you going to the wake? But wake also means that white water that is behind a boat as it glides through. The wave. What are you leaving behind you as a male educator each day, but even when you leave your job? Because the only person who can write your script is you. Because when you leave your role, I have no doubt that for years to come, they'll be talking about you, and you're the one who gets to control that. So what is it? See, in boating terms, it's the track of waves that we leave behind. It can be neatly V-shaped, like a flock of geese heading south, or it can be messy, like a path left behind in a tornado. If you want to know how you're going as an educator, look back, check your wake. You know, if it's straight, you're probably on track. You live in your values, you live in the kind of person you want to be, the kind of educator you want to be. If it's all over the place, you have work to do in correcting your path and the way ahead. And the reality is, every single one of us has messy inside of us. As Carlo Rinaldi famously said, we're perfectly imperfect. It's not about perfection, it's about effort. And there's something that comes with maturity as we kind of make our way through our career. It's what Dr. Joy Goodfellow once wrote about wise practice. Qualifications matter, but qualifications may not give you wisdom. And wise practice occurs over time. It's okay to make mistakes. What's not okay is not to recognize that the wake you've left behind you is messy. So look behind you each day, each week, each year after every job, because it encourages you to know where you've come from. But what it does, it can actually leave you really enthusiastic for what lies ahead. I'm always intrigued in the minds of entrepreneurs and the way in which they work through problems to set up businesses. And I was watching one the other day about the difference between those who succeed and those who do not. And it was a really simple thing that this entrepreneur said. And he said, they know what they want and they go for it. What do you want from your career? Are you existing or are you living? Is it a job or is it a career? These are decisions only you can make about your role. So ask yourself, what do I leave behind? What did I leave behind the other day in an interaction with a child? What did I leave behind in a conversation with a staff member when we didn't agree about a way forward? All this matters. Dr. Henry Cloud wrote about our wake, and he said there's two sides to this: task and relationships. For example, task, what did you accomplish? And relationship, how did you deal with the people around you? Again, the wake is the results of what we leave behind, and it doesn't lie and it doesn't care about any excuses you make as a person. It is what it is. And no matter how you go to try to explain yourself out of a sticky situation, or how you try to justify your wake, it still remains. It's our record. It's your DNA. You know, we encounter people who think differently to us, and that's actually a good thing. I remember when I was working for the Uniting Church in a long day program in inner Sydney, Susan, the teacher in the room, went on leave, and a gentleman, Paul, rocked up. And all of a sudden we had two men in a room, two very different men in a room. The way we showed up was so diverse, it was the best gift to children. He was a guy from the country. He didn't look like me. He didn't speak like me. He didn't teach like me. Some might have said that's a recipe for a disaster. I thought that was a gift to the children around us. How do you work with people when you're so different to them? How are you going to make them feel through that difference? Is the trail you leave behind in situation demoralizing your colleagues, or have they lost the light in their eyes? They're no longer feeling passion for their work. Downtrodden, do they feel like they're working in a machine, not a community? Is there a trail of chaos, infighting, bad attitudes? Or do you leave the opposite? What we want to do as male educators is we show up every day to leave people energized, not depleted, encouraged, not discouraged, inspired to tackle the next challenge. We don't want people to feel like they want to quit. We want people to be engaged, not disengaged, because everything you say or you don't say, even your attitude, your facial expressions, your body language, this has your DNA on it. This is the impact you are leaving behind on people. And that potentiality is often greater than what we think. We all leave an impact on people by how we show up. So what do you leave behind in your actions and in your conversations? Also, what wake do your colleagues leave on you? Because we're not immune from people's wake. Have you encountered something that leaves you feeling demoralized? Have you read something on social media that makes you feel like you're walking on shaky grounds? Because it is a chain reaction. You know, I'm stop sharing because I want to just see some faces for a bit. You learn in life what you listen to and what you can mute out in life. And I learned this very quickly as a consultant in the early years. I learned that no one gets to choose my choices for me. And this comes from the work of Mike Cope. He says, choose your choice before others choose it for you. And that's really, really important. The other thing is, it's not necessarily a mantra, but it could be something that sees you through your career. And you don't have to own what I am about to say, but it's something that I've owned and I keep owning for myself. And you have to think about it as well. So things like, as a consultant, I will negotiate contracts with people. I will negotiate deliverables with government. I will negotiate pricing, but I'll never negotiate my self-worth. As soon as you start negotiating your self-worth as an educator, you're in really difficult grounds. And I don't think our self-worth is ever negotiable. You have to believe when you walk into a space, you have a right to be there, regardless of the noise around you. You can get swept up in it, absolutely. And I think it takes tenacity and a time to kind of dull it out. It doesn't mean you don't become an advocate. Absolutely. We're showing up today because we're advocates. But you don't have to own parents' words who are unfair about male educators. I mean, I know when I was a director, had quite a number of parents who didn't want male educators working with children. And I just had to remind them the door they walked in was the door they could walk out. Because have a guess what? I'm not going to engage in sex discrimination against male educators. It's not negotiable. You know, I am constantly approached by people about homophobia in the workplace around men. And I just say to them, you have to remind families that actually we have same-sex marriage and you have a right to be who you are. And if they don't like it, that's their choice. There are options out there. And the childcare laws have changed that you can actually ask a parent to leave. It wasn't like that before. You had to accept every family that came in, but now you can actually see someone's enrollment. Now that's about protecting everyone in the workplace, because sexism kills people. Homophobia kills people, transphobia kills people, all that stuff kills people. And we have a right to have allies in our workforce, which was so great to have Sam, to have allies around us, not just men saying we have a right to be here. but other people in our sector saying they have the right to be here as well. And that's the torch we all carry for the people around us. So the good news is you get to decide the impact you're going to have. Just be aware of your power. Can I tell you, it's greater than you can possibly imagine. Your greatest weapon, can I tell you, and I've always thought about this, your greatest weapon is your visibility. It's the greatest weapon you have as a male educator. It's just showing up. And if you don't like the word weapon, you can use another word. I took that from the Bangara dance company. The head used to be the head, Stephen Page, who said, my greatest weapon is my blackness. And I've been a man. And I thought that's really interesting. Sometimes our greatest weapon is just showing up at work, being present. You don't have to say anything, because what you're saying is, this is a place of inclusion. And I remember a parent once saying, I don't want males here. And I said, well, I have to get half the boys to leave who are enrolled if you don't want any males in this place. Like, that's the reality. So with that in mind, recognize your power, honor it, and use it for good, because we all have power in how we show up and how we speak. So this idea can be haunting, but it also can be exhilarating. Why is it haunting? Because it clearly shows your character by the actions you leave behind. It's exhilarating because actually it tells you what you believe in by what you do and what you say. Do you think about the wake you're leaving behind? Are you cultivating? Are you destroying? Are you innovating? Are you influencing? You need to be really conscious that everything you do, everything you touch, everything you say, every conversation you have, every learning environment you set up, every program you design has your DNA on it. As Parker Palmer says, we teach who we are. We teach who we are. What you do with children, how you set up your program, tells us who you are as a person. You don't need to talk through it. I can walk into an early childhood program and go, someone here loves sustainability. Why? Because they're teaching who they are. I can see it in the books, in the assessment documents. We need to take personal accountability. That requires you to claim your influence and get clearer and clearer about what you want to leave behind. Because the more intention you have, the more impact you'll have on the people around you. So it's about reaping what you sow. So I'm going to share with you some ideas. But before we do that, what are you sowing into you, into others, and into your organization? And ask yourself this question. How are you going to surprise yourself by the end of the year? What are you going to do that will surprise the people around you? Because only you get to choose that. So here are 9 secrets. Have a mind that is open to everything but attached to nothing. If you have to be right, if you have to possess someone or possess something to win at all cost, to be the last person to speak in a staff meeting, to be seen as superior, they're all attachments. They're unhealthy. The open mind, as an educator, you resist all those. And then consequently, your relationships will change. If you want to solve a problem, you need a new mindset. If you want to find a problem in something, I can guarantee you will find it. You absolutely would. If you want to see the good in something, you'll find that as well. If you change the way you think about something, you'll actually change your relationship with that thing. So don't let your mind be filled with problems, because they'll probably perpetuate them. Are you allowed to have problems? Absolutely. You don't want to do what the literature calls Prozac leadership. Everything is great. Everyone's fantastic. There's not a problem. How do we see Prozac leadership play out in this world? Oh, how's your team going? Oh, they're fantastic. And you've got 4 people licking a wall, 3 rocking in a corner, 5 resignations, and you're saying it's all great here. I mean, this is the way you can disconnect from your people. Sometimes you have to say, we're really struggling in this team at the moment. We've got some personalities that are clashing, but that's okay. We're going to hold that lightly and we'll work through it because that's what we believe in. Or you can see this as a problem and it'll always be a problem. What's another secret? Justified resentment. 0, 0, 0. Whenever you're filled with resentment, you're actually turning your life, particularly your emotional life, for other people to control and manipulate. All emotions actually are beautiful, but resentment means you're carrying that pain because you're letting other people control the way you are feeling. It's a simple thing they talk about in emotional intelligence. Are you controlling your emotions or are they controlling you? Activate your passion. Don't die with the music in you. That music that you hear inside you, telling you to follow your dreams, telling you to chase something you believe in, this is your connection to the purpose in your heart. As Riggio says, remain true to who you are. That calling is your juice. If working with children is your calling, don't let other people's noise drown you out. As Steve Jobs says, people with passion change the world. So I'm going to share a little video. Ramesh, I don't know if you can hear this. If you can't hear it, do you want to just unmute and tell me you can't hear it?
But for the next contestant, the world of showbiz seems a million miles away. It's Paul, a mobile phone salesman from South Wales.
By day, I sell mobile phones. My dream is to spend my life doing what I feel that I was born to do,
Paul, what are you here for today, Paul?
to sing opera. I've always wanted to sing as a career. Confidence has always been sort of a difficult thing for me. I've always found it a little bit difficult to be completely confident in myself.
Okay. Ready when you are.
So don't die with the music still in you. Activate your passion as an early childhood educator. What do you need to do to realize that passion in you? And who's going to hold you accountable to that? Who's going to hold you accountable to realizing the dreams you want to have and where you want to be? And invest in your team. There's a beautiful doctoral study at Bank Street College. A dear friend of mine, Jonathan Sillen, supervised her. Her name was Kafaro. And she said the irony in being an early childhood educator is that education of children always happens in the company of someone else, another adult, children or children. Yet she said we've never felt so lonely in our lives. And in her doctoral work, she says this: teaching is too important to do on your own. You need to know the people around you and they need to know your strengths. Because when you can invest in that, you will get the best out of you and your people. And maximize the people around you. You can't be everything and do everything. Trust me, you're not a bottle of vodka. You can't be everything. But the best teams are great at executing, influencing, relationship building, strategic thinking. You just got to be kind to yourself and say, what am I good at? And of course, we want to develop our skills in other areas. But the whole team has to be well-rounded, not just you. And understand the people around you. Because one of the studies said the thing that people want from their colleagues is trust, compassion, stability, and hope, because that all matters. So your ontology matters. What's your being, becoming, and belonging like? How do you ensure that these 3 Bs operate for you? And what can you do about that? I know for some of us, there's the biggest battle is not from the people around us. The biggest battle is in our own heads, actually. We have this thing often where we think, I'm not good enough to be here. Just as humans, my body shape is not what I want it to be. I'm not smart enough, like all that stuff. You know, I see this all the time when I'm running courses. And whilst I don't want to call it out, because it's never helpful, the reality is, if someone else spoke to you like that, would you accept it? If you were sitting in a course and you put your hand up to answer a question, someone said, hey, stupid, put your hand down. You're not that smart. You're going to make a fool of yourself. What would you call that person? You know, you probably wouldn't call them a friend. You'd call them an enemy. And one of the things we can do to ourselves is talk to ourselves in ways that we would never let anyone else talk to us. And you're never going to fly, because all you're doing is you're plucking your own wings and your own feathers there. Do you sometimes sabotage yourself as a male educator? And no one can change that for you except you, actually. So are you good enough? I think your default position should be, yeah, I am actually. Am I perfect? Not really. No one is. Can I be better? Absolutely. So what should you pursue? I've got some more slides, but I do want to leave some time for dialogue if I can. Excellence, elegance, truth, what's next, what if, courage, value, relationships, service, knowledge, something bigger than yourself. When I was doing my PhD, it was a study of courage. And one of the things that I realized very quickly is that for each and every one of us, there's a story about who we are that we're not willing to tell people. And that's okay. But sometimes you have to tell your story to people so they know who you are. If you're not having a great day, you don't have to be a superhero. You could actually turn to someone and say, there was a comment by a parent yesterday that really rattled me. I'm not going to shop 100% today. I might be 50%. Or there was something else in the media about men in early childhood. And I know it's not me, but I can't help but feel like I'm wedded into that kind of conversation. Just let people see you for who you really are. And there's some lovely work out there on taking off your armor as an educator. Take off your armor. You don't want to be something you're not. I got my first senior role in government when I was 26, and I led a team of over 1,000 people. And I remember it was my 3rd day in the office, and I was in a lift, and I have to say, he's actually one of my good friends now. He's retired, and I called him out on it, and he turned to me in the lift, and he said, "You're not going to last here." And I said, "Oh," and he said, and these were his words, "You're the first WOG we've had in this level, and you're the youngest leader we've had." And he goes, "And by the way, I heard you had lunch at the lunch table with your team yesterday." you're not going to last. And I was like, And as tempting as it was, I gave myself one goal, and that was I was going to go to his farewell party, him not come to my farewell party, and I won that. I actually won that. And I just thought, this is interesting. But I remember going to work and looking at all the men that I worked with, and they were mainly all senior men who headed departments. And I started to buy clothes that are not me. My armor was coming up. And the head of the department came to me one day, and sorry, there's a swear word here, so just block your ears if you don't want to hear it. It was about 2 weeks in. So I just went to David Jones and I bought what I call lazy fashion, the shirt that comes with the tie that matches, wrapped in plastic. And I bought a checkered one. I bought a pink one, a blue one, a green one, a yellow. Like I bought 5 colors. And I would just wear this because that's what the men were wearing. And she walks past my office and she says to me, "What the fuck are you wearing?" And I went, I froze. And she said, "I employed you for your brains, not your outfit. Take off that stupid outfit. That's not who you are." And all of a sudden, I could feel like I was breathing again because I was trying to be something I'm not. You have to own your personhood. Don't be someone else. It's too tiring and the world won't see you for who you are. Needless to say, I wore black from that point on and have still been wearing black for nearly 50 years. Relationships matter, and always think it's bigger than me. So what you pursue will determine the path you travel, the people you associate with, the character you develop. Always have a mind that says, I don't want to be mediocre. Because the manner and the method and the motivation that you bring to work every day will determine what you leave behind. So see the potential in people. You know, the brain can really influence us to be great or not. If you're feeling like you've been hijacked, just remind yourself feelings are real, but they're not a reality. Just because you're scared of flying doesn't mean the plane's going to fall out of the sky. And sometimes we treat our feelings like something bad is going to happen. So what's going to be written about you? Are you going to brand your authority, or are you going to brand yourself as controlling? What do you want in your wake? If you really want to find out the wake you have, go and talk to someone like a colleague, your best friend, a family member who's going to be honest, not someone who's going to suck up to you and tell you you're fantastic. Someone who's really going to give you the truth, because that's where transformation happens. And I also want to suggest that leadership is overplayed. I'm kind of over talking about leadership, to be honest, because leadership happens with followership, because to lead, you need a follower. And I just think that dichotomy doesn't work for me. So if you can let go of leadership and followership and think us-ship, what would it mean if you can work in a place that there's no power games, that it is about us-ship? What might that look like? What comes to mind? What might you, as a male educator, teacher, how might you use us-ship to strengthen your presence, to make sure that you will continue to do what you want to do because that's your calling? Colin and I wrote this, Colin Slater, who owns a business with me. We've had this business now for 25 years. We said us-ship is an approach that emphasizes collective responsibility, shared vision, mutual empowerment. It's an environment where everybody contributes, where we collaborate and we co-lead because we believe in a common goal. And this dismantles the convention hierarchy between leader and follower. Rather, it is a culture of inclusion, a culture of trust and joint ownership. Remember, this job is too hard to do on your own because we are all under construction. Who you are at the end of today is not who you entered when you came into this conference. You're going to hear things that will change you as a person. That is good. So what might you be facing right now? And what can you do to journey with more confidence, more hope, more peace, and more joy? And I just want to share some wise words with you. You're not alone. Often we can think we are the only ones who are facing something, and you're not. Turn to colleagues, hear their stories and how they've navigated this. Here's the other thing. You can be the most powerful person in the room, the most qualified person in the room. You could be the most paid person in the room, the most senior person in the room. It doesn't make you the most influential person in the room. The most influential person in any room is the most hopeful person in the room, because hope influences. How are you going to use hope as your currency as a male educator? And change is possible. And if you don't believe that change is possible, speak to a farmer. They sow seeds. They don't pull the soil up the next day and go, oh, has it grown? Oh, has it grown? They just leave it there and they wait, because they truly believe change is possible. So remember, we've all got messy stuff that we have to attend to. And it's not one big giant step. Just these small steps to become the leader you want to be. And remember, we repeat what we don't repair. We all have habits that we need to break. We all need to become better at our personhood and our presence. So when you accept yourself for who you are, honestly, then you can change. And you just got to accept that. So this is Rupi Kaur's work, and she says, when the world comes crashing down at your feet, it's okay to let others help pick up your pieces. If we're going to be present to take part in your happiness, when your circumstances are great, then we are more capable of sharing your pain. Community. And what has been developed in this Thriving as Male Educator conference and the online space is a community. We can't just show up for each other when there's happiness. We have to show up when there's pain for people. So you have your real self and you have your ideal self, and you want to keep working to become the person you want to be. So ask yourself, what strengths do you have that you can tap in more regularly? What are you going to do to increase your satisfaction at work? Are there parts of your job that give you great satisfaction? Are there parts that make you feel terrible? What values are important to you? How are you going to show a level of care and affection towards the people you work with? And are you exhibiting any behaviours that will undermine your productivity at work? Yes, we encounter challenges and struggles, but let me just remind you, don't make long-term decisions based on short-term emotions. Things happen and you just got to take a pause and step back, because sometimes we make long-term decisions because of something that just happened. Pause, reach out, jump onto the Facebook page, share, because people will show up for you when you need them to. And I'll leave you with this Vygotsky quote. Through others, we become ourselves. We are who we are because of the people around us. And that's a reality. I have become who I am because of the people who have supported me in my career. And I want to name up one particular person, who was Betty Hobson. Betty Hobson was a manager in local government, and she brought the anti-bias approach to Australia. Okay, she's amazing. And I was teaching at Ella Community Childcare Centre, and I got a phone, the director got a phone call, and Betty, she put me on the phone, didn't know Betty that well, and she said, I'd like you to be on an interview panel. And I'm like, I've never been on an interview panel. So I went to her office, started this interview, and I was a bit early. Well, she asked me to come in a bit early. And I just said, Betty, why am I here? Like, is this a male thing? Like, do you need a male on this? She said, no, no, no. She said, you've got to nurture the next group of people. None of us are around forever. And just remind yourself, you've had many firsts because someone gave you the leg up. You applied for your first job and you got it, even though you didn't have experience before, but they believed in you. You got your first room leader's job because someone believed in you. How are we going to give that back to people? And I want to name out Robert Benson, who's been around for such a long time and has been a great mentor. You know, these people give us opportunities to fly. And I think we all have a responsibility to do that to the people around us, okay? Because there will be many generations of men who come after us. And so just remember your wake and what you're leaving behind. Now, I know I've got a couple of minutes, but Ramesh, I'm wondering if there's any questions. I haven't been monitoring anything, or maybe there aren't any. Someone said they want to run through a brick wall. Is that a bad thing?
I think you have inspired everyone, Anthony.
That's a good thing. Oh, I'm someone to kill themselves. I'm wondering if there's any questions or anything.
Not a question, but I just want to say you've inspired me and got me again thinking something great out of one of your presentations. And yeah, thank you very much for coming on and doing it for free for us. Thank you very much.
Thanks, buddy. I'm always there. Like I said, there's people who have been there. We had a men in early childhood group, many like 30 years ago, probably longer than that. At the little centre I worked in, and people like Craig Darcy, who then moved to Newcastle. You know, those people were there for all of us, and you know, we stand on the shoulders of greats. So yeah, I really appreciate that, Ben. Anytime. Thanks, Ramesh and the team. I am so sorry I can't be. I've got to give a keynote in like 25 minutes at this conference. I'm hiding in some room, which is not, I don't usually have seats that have 4-meter backing on them. I'm not that tall, but yeah.
No,
Thanks,
thank you, and thank you, Anthony. Your session was so powerful and so thought-provoking. I think we all can see that passion that you have. And I always say that the purpose needs to be bigger than the person.
Yeah.
And once you find your purpose, you are unstoppable. And I think you have found your purpose and you're passing it on to new male educators, and you have passed it on to all participants. So thank you so much for doing this.
most
I
welcome.
think it's incredible. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody, and enjoy
And
the rest of your conference.
best of luck for your conference.
Thanks, mate. Take care.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
See you, everyone. See you, Robert. Bye, everyone. See you, Ralph.
Wow, that was such an inspirational session, and I can see that the chat had been flooding with all the messages and positive responses. I could also see few twitching and turning happening. I think we have been sitting for a while. Would you like a 5-minute break and then we go to Dr. Martin's session? Are you okay with that, Martin? All right, we'll take a quick 5-minute break. If you need to get a coffee, go to the loo, and then we'll be back. We'll be back at, let's say, 1:10. Does that work, Martin? 1:10? Okay,
Yeah,
we'll
mate,
do
that's
that.
12:40 over here, but yep, I've got it.
Oh, sorry. After 10 minutes. Sorry,
All good.
I need to. I think we are slowly all coming back now. We'll just wait for Dr. Martin and then we'll get started when he's back.
I'm here, my friend.
Oh, he is here. The legend. So I would like to introduce Dr. Martin, who has been a great advocate for male educators. He runs mentorship program in University of South Australia. He has done so many works. He has been featured in multiple articles. He was one of the first person to jump on board and reach out and say that if you are doing this, you have my full support. Let's do this. And it just sort of shows what kind of person he is. Today he will be sharing inspiring stories that highlights the challenges and triumphs faced by men in our field, with a focus on how we can all move beyond survival and truly thrive in our work and lives. So I'll like to hand over to Martin. Thank you so much, Martin.
Thanks, Ramesh. Look, it's just an amazing day today, isn't it? Like, I want to just kind of reach out to, sorry, I'm in a really echoey room. I'm in my wife's office today, so I hope it doesn't sound like I'm in an echo chamber. But I just want to reach out and hope that Adam's okay. I was really looking forward to hearing from Adam today. And let's face it, he's thrown me in the deep end because now I've got to follow Anthony's commands. So, you know, probably should reach out and say, come on, Adam, why'd you do that? Anyway, I hope he's okay. But yeah, what a great day. It's been awesome so far. I'm really happy to be part of this conference, to be involved in what feels like one of those powerful moments in life. Ben, Ramesh, David, Ralph, and Anthony and others have certainly put a lot of time and energy into this. And I want to talk about some things about men in early childhood. But the great thing here is that I don't have to start with, why are there so few men in early childhood? We all know the answers to these questions already. Most of my lectures, speeches, chats talk with that kind of, background work. So hopefully, because I don't have to do that, that's really good. You'll know the reasons why. Let me see if my controller is going to work. Can you see the slides? Yep, cool. All right. I'll click on that. Why isn't it moving forward for me? Hold on. There we go. Again, not my computer today, but that's okay. I just want to start by giving my own acknowledgement. I'm standing here on beautiful Ghana land. So part of my thinking about what Anthony was saying, part of the reason why I do an acknowledgement and then what comes next is around encouraging language use, working with our First Nations children, educators and colleagues. And one of my great colleagues, Professor Irabina Rigney, who guides me and mentors me in many ways, encourages me to use First Nations language wherever possible. So I apologise at the start. But Nadlagana Mina, Tampandi, Panayata, Matanya Puku Yununku, Nadlo Tampandi, Gana Mina, Puruparna, Warma, Gana, Gana Kuntiata. Which means I acknowledge the land of the Ghana people and their connection to that land, the air, the waterways, and I value their ongoing connection to those land, air and waterways. My university has a strong commitment to reconciliation, a strong commitment to supporting Aboriginal educators and teachers and that next wave of great educators. I did this slide while Anthony was talking. I was listening, but I did this slide while he was talking. I thought, well, what's my wake? What am I leaving behind? And it made me think, and I just did some quick diving, and I think Akash is on this conference somewhere. So I apologise for putting your face up there, mate. But I started, this guy on the left is Mr. Kim Brown. He was the first male educator I ever had. And that was not until year 3. So he was my year 3 teacher. Ran into him at a recent conference and was able to have a chat and tell him the influence he'd have. So when I was thinking about what Anthony said about the wake that I'm leaving, I'm actually following in the wake of others. I'm following in the wake of Mr. Brown, who, unlike lots of other teachers I encountered, helped me see that I could be myself. And I think that's what Anthony was saying. Trust yourself and be who you are. You can't be anyone else. And Mr. Brown kind of taught me that at an early age. In the middle picture there is Russell Ballantyne. Russell is one of the legends of the New Zealand early childhood space, and I was over there giving a keynote lecture last month, the month before, and got a chance to catch up with Russell. He's unwell at the moment, but yeah, he's another guy that, you know, in my kind of collegial space has had a real impact on me, is the wake that I follow. And hopefully today I'll show you how that wake has kind of developed from New Zealand as well as Australia. And on the right, I hope these are the people that my wake isn't disturbing their path too much, but is hopefully helping the next wave and generation of male educators like myself to see that they belong, to see that they're not alone, to see that, you know, while it may feel isolating at times, we have a network together, and the Thriving as Male Educators is part of that now, which is fantastic. And yeah, an amazing thing to do today, to talk to each other like this. So I just thought I'd start with that, build on Anthony's work. And yeah, this is what I'm going to try and do today. But like any good academic, I've done too much. I'll probably try and cover too much and then miss the last 4 slides. It's generally how it happens, isn't it? But the slides are there for you. I'm going to show some video too. Now, I noticed they're a bit choppy when Anthony was showing it. And I think, Ramesh, I'll send you the links and you can have those videos to share if it doesn't work very well from your end. So that's how kind of my roadmap for today anyway. But guiding all of this is my question, which came about when I started hearing about the Thriving as Male Educators network last year, or, you know, sometime in 2023, I think, is that how can we thrive as part of a diverse, high quality early childhood and education and care workforce, rather than just survive? You know, all too often male educators kind of get worn down, pushed up, pushed out, or bumped out through the day-to-day interactions, through not having a leader, or what was it, an us-ship that helps you feel supported. That's really a key to staying in the field, I find, is that you've got to have that support around you. You've got to have help from others. You've got to have a sense that you're not alone in this journey. So that's my kind of guiding concern. How can we do that? And I think today, there are days like today that make it possible. So I want to focus on extending our support networks. Virtual conferences are a funny space because you don't really get a chance to chat and have a conversation with each other very much. But hopefully today is kind of the start of something for many of you, is the continuation of something for many of you, or gives you that sense that, yeah, I feel like I have a community around me. So it comes through support networks like, and I've just acronymed you there, guys, as Thriving as Male Educators, TAME. You know, I know you probably don't like that, but that's okay. There's things like EC Men's, there's things like my own mentor program that I created. There's the Australian Association for Men in Early Childhood, which colleagues of mine created, but has been dormant and could be a kind of vehicle down the track alongside of the work that we do. And I know that many of you work in services where there are those networks. I know Good Start has a great male educator network of supporting each other and helping each other. But I just thought I'd share 2 little quotes here from, you know, a range of kind of male educators out there. I just got in contact with a guy who claims to be the only male preschool teacher in Sri Lanka, right? How's that? You're the only teacher in a country that's a male. I'm not sure that's true or not, but he's feeling like he's, you know, one of not many, and was reaching out for support to support him. So, you know, mentorship and support can extend networks beyond Australia. And here's some words from one of my students, current male student, who was doing an assignment, and he wrote this. He's mature, a bit like me. I don't think he's my age, but he said that he's aware that there is some stigma. We all know that there's a stigma out there for men in early childhood, and it is challenging at times. But he recognised this as part of his teacher identity, and that his gender will matter. And it's possible he may be the oldest and the only male in a centre or a setting, and have the least experience. And that's a really interesting kind of paradox to be really experienced in life with children perhaps, and other experiences, yet be kind of learning in this new space. So in my mind, our networks are really broad. They support everyone in an individualised way. And I hope that I can kind of guide you through what that looks like. I noticed that Anthony used penguins in his presentation, which was nice. And here come these penguins again. So EC Men's uses these penguins because if you don't know, the emperor penguin looks after the chick's egg for the beginning of its life, keeps it alive and keeps it safe. So they use that that analogy as their symbol for EC Men's. I've been working because I think the emu does a better job than a penguin, to be honest. The emu looks after the kids after they've hatched as well. You know, the male emu follows the children around and supports them in those early years. And I wonder whether the emu might be, you know, one of our kind of symbols that says, well, we can do this as well over here. I'm just going to share with you a video. For those of you that know this particular man, he's a legend of New Zealand. He's also comes over here quite often. I think he's actually here at the moment in Melbourne. This is Robin Christie from the Child Space New Zealand. They do lots of great PD and support, but he offered to share a little message of support for you all, and I hope the audio works well.
We are not able to hear the audio, Martin.
No audio? Okay, let me just go back to my settings. That's terrible, isn't it? I hate when that happens. Is it in my sharing settings?
Yeah, so Martin, if you go into the share button, up the very top, you'll see a little slide thing that says include sound. If you slide that across and restart the video.
Brilliant, Michelle. You're amazing.
No worries.
I'm so happy that Michelle is here. We would be
Brilliant,
so lost without her.
Honestly, I'm so used to things stuffing up technology-wise that I just roll with it. I'm not concerned. We'll get there. Let me go back and see if I can. I'll go back and try again. Okay. Is that better?
We can't see the video at the moment, Martin. Do you want to try resharing it?
One day something will work for me. It's all right. I'll just go right out of that. I'll share. I was sharing the wrong thing, was I? Share the screen. I pressed the button for music, but didn't press the sharing of the screen. That's clever. Okay. Can we see a blank screen?
We can.
Excellent. Can we hear music?
We can.
Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou. Te whenua e te koto nei, tēnā koe. Te tangata whenua, tēnā koutou. Ngā hoa whānga iwi e tau nei, tēnā tātou katoa. Tihe, mauri ora. Kia ora koutou. My name is Robin Christie from Child Space Early Learning Centres here in Wellington in New Zealand, and it is a great honour for me to be sending this message of friendship and respect to your Thriving as Male Educators conference this year. On behalf of ECEC. ECEC is our national network here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, that supports and celebrates gender diversity in the early childhood profession. We are so excited to be hearing about what you're up to over there, and we're sending you a lot of good vibes, because the work that we do collectively is changing the world. We're making the world a better place. But we're under no illusions. We know this work is tough work. It's demanding physically, it's demanding emotionally, it's demanding cognitively. So when those times are tough, please remember that across the ocean you have friends and colleagues and cousins who are sending you good vibes and great energy and much respect and much love. Please, on behalf of ECEC, we wish you all the best for this hui. This meeting. It's a great time to make new friends, to share your own story, and to be inspired. So, kia kaha e hoa ma. Stay strong, my friends. On behalf of all of us here at ECEC, go well. Kia ora. Tihe, mauri ora.
There we go. So, the man, the myth, the legend, Robin Christie. Let me get my screen back and we'll be good. Clicking. Okay. I can control this thing. It's all right. Okay. So I said to Robin, yeah, you can use a lot of Maori because he generally does, but people probably won't understand what you're saying, mate. Yeah, he was really keen to share support and show that across the Tasman we have support. We have cousins and you know, like-minded people who are over there doing amazing stuff. And he wanted me to share with you that next year, and they do this every year, next year ECMENS have their national summit. And if you've never been over there to one, this is an amazing experience. So 2025, the summit is happening in Whangarei in Northland in Aotearoa, New Zealand, on Saturday, the 8th of March. So if you can get over there, you can always email Robin. He's always keen to hear from people anyway. You can always reach out to him that way. I'm technically the international advisor of ECMENS. He gave me some weird title, and he is kind of my international guy from New Zealand. So yeah, great opportunity, and I'll explain why it's important. As I said, today is an amazing day. I can't express this enough, and I want to kind of try to explain why with numbers. The first time I went over to New Zealand for the ECMENS conference was their 10th annual hui, their meeting, in 2016 in Tauranga. Those of you that know Tauranga might know that that is the birthplace of Harry McClary. I was so excited. I got to go see Harry McClary's statue. It was the best day ever. But this was the first time ever in an early childhood conference they had to line up for a toilet. A very small thing, but this was the first time ever. You know, a bunch of like-minded guys, they all sat around and played the ukulele, a lot like you saw Robin doing there. We played this game called Kickies. I don't know what that was, but we kicked the footy end to end, basically. I taught them some things. They taught me some things about jandals, but it was a nice sharing of this kind of space. They had 40 people at that conference. 40. Okay. Hold on to that thought. The next year, I got together with Molly Roden. I don't know if many of you know Molly Roden, who out of Canberra does some amazing work through her Down to Earth Practical Solutions group. She was doing a conference for men in early childhood as well the next year. Got to go there, do that speak. There were 42 of us there in Canberra. Some of them might be in the room today, I think. But yeah, again, I thought 42 people. This is amazing. All of these male educators. I'd never seen so many male educators that shared their stories, had similar ideas, had similar experiences. We're all passionate about supporting young children's learning. The next year I went to Molly, you know what, we've got to do this again. 2018, we brought it to Adelaide. And this was, again, so this is why I have sympathy for everyone organising today. I organised this conference. It nearly killed me. But we did it during Adelaide Fringe, and we called it Male Educators on the Fringe. And we had 55 people there. We had so much support from a range of organisations here in South Australia and nationally, through CELA, through the different kind of early childhood organisations that were willing and able to pay for people to come. And again, I know there are people in the room today who are at that conference. Rob Benson, the legend, was there as well. That was when I met Rob, and yeah, I was really glad that he was able to be there, among many other amazing educators who came from interstate. Something happened in 2019. I don't know if you remember. There was something called COVID, I believe. So it didn't happen again. It didn't happen ever again since then, because it just took a lot of energy. But here we are today. Oh, sorry, I'll stay on that one. Here we are today, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ramesh. We peaked at 95 people so far.
That's correct, Martin.
Yep,
and the registration was 232. So I think it's great to see 95 people, lots of registration, and the recording will circulate. So we are reaching lots of male educators.
So good, so good. So I just wanted to highlight that 95 people today in this room at the most, that nearly doubles what we've had previously in this area. And I know, as Anthony suggested, there were previous iterations of male networks that Craig Darcy ran out of New South Wales, and others, but it's never peaked like this. So this is just an amazing opportunity now to keep building this, to work together, to share our knowledge and our passion, and come together regularly in these kind of meetings, in these, we could call them conferences or whatever we want to call them, right? But to come together and to share our passion for education, to support each other, and to be there for each other and create our own collective wake. That's what I think is amazing about today. So I thought I'd show you a bit of the past of what has happened for men in early childhood gathering like this, right? For me personally, this is kind of my journey from Batman through to where I am today. I came here to Adelaide as a 3-year-old, and we were in a migration centre for a little while. But it wasn't until I started getting into education and I had that Mr. Brown experience in year 3, I didn't really see that education was a pathway for me, because a lot of teachers told me that I was not living up to my potential. I dropped out of high school. I had high school counsellors tell me you might as well be going working in the treatment plants at Bolivar, doing low level kind of work. And it wasn't until I had my own children that I'd sort of realised that my passion might actually be for education. So from that point forward, and I graduated as a male early child, not as a male, I was already a male, but I graduated as an early childhood educator, a Bachelor of Early Childhood Education with honours, and my journey into teaching, particularly in preschools and reception classrooms here, or foundation classrooms, began. But it was, through that process that I realised, there's not many other blokes around. There's not many other people like me. I didn't see my identity connected. And I started to think about how I could support those people. As I moved into my university career, I started to build this kind of support network through the mentor program. It has now continued on. And I'm going to talk to you at the end of today about the Thrive by 5 Dad's Action Plan that I'm now kind of championing, and is kind of the vehicle through which I'm trying to do a whole bunch of work. We all kind of know this, but I thought I'd go over a little bit of this ground. Most recent kind of figures, and Sam said at the beginning of this conference that the numbers are kind of increasing for male educators. It's a really hard figure to kind of capture, because a lot of these figures for early childhood educators, particularly in centre-based daycare, include all the males in the centre. They often don't include just the educators, so it's kind of a skewed figure sometimes. But you can see the highlighted or circled areas that I've got there, that child carers, this is what the government uses. The government uses child carers, right? What a horrible way to describe what we do. Amazing, powerful educators. We sit at about, if you do the maths, because you've got to reverse it, 4.4% of the workforce. If we think about early childhood teachers, child carers are those that they typify have a Cert 3 or a diploma in early childhood education and care. Early childhood teachers, bachelor, master's qualification, you know this. 2.4% early childhood teachers still, it's not shifting much. So we know there's a huge shortage. What I was thinking about in this, and I saw some things kind of pop up on through the chat and on social media and things about this kind of early childhood educator versus early childhood teacher. And what I want us to do as a community is to come together and support each other, because male early childhood educators are facing the same challenges that male early childhood teachers are facing. We're all together on this. And I see myself as an educator, even if I've trained as a teacher. I think we're all doing amazing work in educating. And what we need is the government and society to kind of catch up and say, stop using the word industry, stop comparing us to workers. We're actually powerful educators. So we've got to do that kind of narrative shift in society. But let's come together. Let's not create a dichotomy between the different, forms of male early childhood educator. I hope we can do that. Again, a little bit of data. You can see something happened around 2019, 2020 with the graph for those of you in the eastern states on the right. And suddenly after COVID, we've got this huge need for more educators. People left the sector in droves, and the need for more and more educators is huge. Now, the National Workforce Strategy is aiming to improve the number of educators, full stop, through attraction and then retention programs, right? There is a huge focus on encouraging and supporting the early childhood workforce. And they kind of recognise this, that there is a need to target specific groups of potential educators. My argument to government, my argument to anyone who's willing to listen to me, is that male educators are a huge part of that diversity, that huge part of that potential group of people that we should be targeting. The National Quality Framework, as you know, needs a certain percentage of educators in a centre. At least 50% in a centre must be diploma levelled, and you must have, depending on the number of children, an early childhood teacher full-time or part-time, or 2 if you've got one of those larger centres. So there is a need for more and more educators out there working with our young children, high-quality educators. But I think while we need this, it's not being addressed particularly well in terms of gender diversity. This came out this week, just gone, the Early Childhood Education and Care Workforce Capacity Study. They highlighted, and this was the work of Professor Glover, Bernard Glover, I think his name was, AO, suggested that in the near future, we're going to need an additional 21,000 qualified early childhood educators to be able to meet the needs of our changing society, of families' needs, and that where are they going to come from, I think is the question I'm asking here. But he also acknowledged that diversity was important. Our communities that are most in need, regional, remote communities, communities where there is a high Aboriginal population. There is a huge need for more educators in those spaces. We've got some great educators working in those spaces. We need more diverse workers so that children can see their identities reflected in their educators. Here in South Australia, we had Julie Gillard chairing the South Australian Royal Commission in Early Childhood Education and Care, and they came up with 43 recommendations to try and change the quality of outcomes for children here in this state. The government thankfully has a focus on this kind of area and has accepted all of those recommendations and is looking to increase universal access to preschool for 3-year-olds, which is fantastic. It gives children and families more opportunities. Children have, hopefully access to high quality educators at an earlier age. Obviously, Aboriginal children already have this, but this is for all children as well, which is fantastic. But here's the rub. The government has kind of recognised that we need an additional 660 early childhood teachers, ECTs, early childhood teachers, to meet the demands of this proposal. In addition to that, an additional 880 early childhood educators and another 120 other roles. That's a lot, right? That's a lot additional. It's hard enough getting people through their studies as it is. It's a challenge, particularly if those of you that might know early childhood teachers, if they're doing a birth to 8 program or a birth to year 12 program, which is crazy, they have to do LANTITE, the literacy and numeracy test for initial teachers, and there are lots of imposts on their ability to do that, and it is a challenge. So it's a struggle to get through one of those degrees anyway, and then we're looking for an additional 660, as well as that additional nearly 1,000 early childhood educators coming through RTOs and TAFEs. That's huge. So one note that I think is that the government's scrambling in this area to try and do more, but they might find some shortcuts here. And I think we need to be mindful that if these shortcuts happen, that they often stay as the default. And this was recognised by Gary SA in their response to the Commission in stating that what we do as a temporary measure is often the norm over time. And we need to be mindful that we're not just, providing more people that don't have the appropriate qualifications to be able to support young children. And thinking about what Blake was talking about, the neurodivergent child, the additional needs that, are required in centres to support a range of children's needs is just growing. So we need to actually think about this carefully. Just an idea about the amount of money that's being thrown at this at the moment in this state. $1.9 billion has been said to be given by the state government in this latest budget. 96.6 million of that is going to be put towards growing and supporting our early childhood workforce. And this is where my thinking and my focus comes in, because the Office of Early Childhood Development in South Australia has taken on board workforce attraction and retention. Okay, they've got 56 million of that 96 million. God, it's terrible to talk figures, isn't it? 56 million of that is going to be put towards trying to get those 880, those 660 educators and teachers. They talk about it in a very broad range. What I'm a little bit upset about and a little bit disappointed about at this time is that gender diversity is still just buried in with all other forms of diversity. We know that diversity in our education workforce is important, but we're kind of missing 50% of the population here. We're getting lots of young boys growing up, maybe not having access to high quality interactions with male educators, maybe not seeing high quality interactions between male and female and non-binary educators. We're getting young boys who are not seeing that a male educator is a possible pathway, is a possible career choice for them. So I think we're missing a little bit of the trick at the moment, but I hope this changes as these dollars get spent and rolled out. But I'm in people's ears at the moment trying to help them see that gender is important here. So there's a lot of money on the table at the moment nationally. There's a lot of money on the table in each state. Those of you from Victoria know this has kind of swept through Victoria recently. It's coming to South Australia as well. But despite all of this money and all of this focus, I don't think there's a clear focus on increasing gender diversity and supporting a diverse workforce. I think Sam mentioned this about women in STEM at the start. So there is a huge kind of, and obviously the KFC model that she mentioned, will take all their ideas. But there are more and more women coming into STEM. There are more and more financial supports to support women coming into STEM. And there is a huge concern about the low numbers of women in STEM-based subjects. Huge concern about numbers. There's been an increase of up to 50% of women going into STEM-based occupations. So they've done amazing work. They've increased the number of women here, which is great. We need to learn from this. We need to do this better in our space. But here's the rub. Women going into STEM generally earn more than they might otherwise have done. Men coming into early childhood education and care, despite, the 15% that's been promised over 2 years, will often take a pay cut compared to what, you might be able to earn in other industries. I use the word industry, in other sectors. These are the figures across some of those industries that women. So they're concerned, massively concerned about the shortage of women when it's 16%, 18%, 20%. And yet here we are, and I'll just come back to that in a minute, but here we are with 2%, with 3%, with 4% over a long period of time. Nothing's changing. Maybe throwing money at it isn't the solution. Maybe there are other things we can do to support an increase in more of us, male educators supporting young children. This has been going on for a long time, right? This has been going on for a long time. And I just wanted to highlight that, this was 10 years ago. I remember talking to Craig Darcy probably about this time actually, and about the challenges that he was seeing, male educators facing. I think he, and I'll speak on his behalf a little bit, but I think he failed an exam of holding a baby because he passed the doll by the leg to someone else. And I'm not sure that necessarily would have been the same if he was not a man. But, we're perceived in different ways. So, we've got to think about the money, but we've got to think about how we're going to focus on that. Part of my work and what I'm trying to do with a range of other people is to change things for men in society. And part of that is about changing things for male educators in our jobs. The Thrive by 5 initiative has a bunch of support behind it. I was lucky enough to meet a Wiggle, which is exciting. It wasn't an OG Wiggle, because all of you know the OG Wiggles are, or were, 3 of them, early childhood educators, right? Apart from Jeff. And I'm not sure if you know the reason why Jeff came in. Music talent, I believe it is. But he was really uncertain about how he was able to do this and work with young children. So they said to him, don't worry, Jeff, we're educators, we've been thinking about this. We've got this shtick that we're going to do where we want to get crowd involvement. So what we're going to do is one of us is going to pretend to be asleep. And that's going to get the kids to go, wake up. And Jeff became that person. So that's how Jeff kind of got involved and got his identity as a Wiggle. But so the Wiggles are involved here, which is great. And you might have seen things from Simon, the Red Wiggle, in this space. But essentially, these are the things that Thrive by 5 Dads Alliance is trying to do, is to help fathers get more involved in children's lives through an equal share of parenting and some education campaigns around how men can be part of children's lives, to increase investment into tailored perinatal education, because sometimes dads feel like they're left out at that moment where their partner, the birthing partner is having the baby. They kind of get left to the side sometimes. So working in that space, increasing federally funded parental leave for fathers and non-birthing parents, because what often happens is that families are kind of forced into taking one part of the maternity leave or the paternity leave, but not enough of it. So we want it so it's not taking away from maternity leave and can actually encourage men to be involved in children's lives from the get-go. To implement and fund universal access for high quality early learning systems. And obviously, as you know, the work is going on with the workforce strategy around that as well, which is great. And then there's the piece that I'm really keen to focus on, which is this, that we need a national early childhood workforce strategy that encourages male participation. But more than just encourages male participation, that supports male participation and retention, so that you're not getting burnt out, you're not getting pushed out, you're not, going somewhere else. We need you working with young children and doing the amazing work that we do. So as part of that, we kind of came up with some ways that we can possibly do that. And I'm really keen for anyone who wants to be involved in any of this to reach out to me, please. The more voices we have in this space, the better it's going to be for everybody. But we are aiming to build and raise awareness of early childhood education as a career of choice. Yeah, obviously the pay needs to keep improving. We need to keep, advocating in that space as well. But to raise awareness that early childhood is the possibility. Young men, young boys growing up might not even know that this is a possibility and how enriching it can be to be an educator. We need to keep championing those high quality male early childhood educators and early childhood teachers. We need to highlight the work they do. We need to talk to media and get those stories out there, those stories of hope, those amazing things that educators are doing. And, things like recognising the great work of educators like Ralph and Rob Benson here today is another thing that kind of builds on that. It can be through social media, but it can also be through regular media as well. But we need to do that. We need to show that we are here and that we are doing amazing work. Not better than our female colleagues, but different in many ways. As Anthony said, there are a range of male identities out there. There are, often, I'll tell you a little story here at this point. I gave a speech at a Rotary Club this week, just gone. There's a different kind of crowd. There's an older crowd. And some of those people said to me, it's just great to hear someone talking about the two genders again. Like they didn't understand the nature of gender in modern society, perhaps, but they were looking for this kind of particular type of masculinity that when I was talking about male educators saying, yeah, we need the children to go in and work in the making space. We need the children to show children how to do rough and tumble play. Yeah, that's part of it, absolutely. But there are also many, many great male educators who, like me, want to work in the socio-dramatic corner, who want to support children in a whole range of ways that are not making ways, because these hands do not do making very well. They do risky play all right, but there's a range of male identities that we need to tap into here and champion that across the board. So we need to build on Dad's involvement in children's lives and that possibility for many of you that might be that career change moment. It was for me. I had children. I suddenly saw that was something I was interested in, and it became my career. So maybe we can think about not just building the idea of early childhood as a career from the early years, but also for those men who are looking to shift their career and do something that's really rewarding. And that bigger, broader piece, the societal piece that will take years and years and years to change, but hopefully we can do something in that space, is to change the public and society's perception of men. Our roles as carers, our roles as educators, the amazing work we do working with young children. That's a big, broad thing, but we hope to make changes in that space. I know that the video is going to work for the next one now, hopefully. So I'm just going to show you a video that we created off the back of this Thrive by 5 work. It is focused on early childhood teachers. I apologise for that if you're an early childhood educator, but we are together. And this is part of that narrative, and maybe we can do something else in this space as we go forward. Anyway, I'm going to show you a video. Who's on TikTok here? Anyone a TikToker? Some, yeah, good. Okay. So you might know one of these people in this video. He's a famous TikTok superstar called Mr. Luke. He's just written a book that's out there, so watch out for him. And some bald bloke. Hi, I'm Marty Mills-Bain, and I'm a passionate early childhood teacher. So male educators are really important in young children's lives because some children might not have access to male role models, have positive influences in their life. We know that there's only 3% of the early childhood workforce are male educators, so there's a massive need to have more diversity in the teaching workforce. Men bring amazing things to young children's lives. Young children get to see that interaction between male educators and female educators. They get to see men showing caring roles and being involved in children's lives, and it can be pretty fun when they work with young children.
One of the fantastic things that I find about having a diverse team of educators and early childhood teachers is the energy that different people bring. I think it's very important for children to be able to differentiate different people in their lives that bring different things, and we all have people like that in our lives, so why should it be any different in an early childhood and care setting? I think for me it was really important to employ males, as I thought that for me, as someone that I would want the children within my service to look up to. And as a child, we do tend to idolise the people that we surround ourselves with, and the male educators and teachers that I have at both of my sites are fantastic and have built absolutely incredible relationships with the children and the families abroad.
Hi, my name's Luke Springer and I'm a reception teacher here in South Australia, and I absolutely love what I do. It's amazing. I love that every day is different, and the fact that I get to make a positive impact on my tiny humans, my little legends, is amazing. But also the fact that I guess I don't know where my positive influence ends. I guess I'm teaching my little people to learn to read and write and spell and all that amazing stuff, and I would like to think their skills that they're going to take with them for the rest of their life. So that's a little warm and fuzzy. That hits me in the heartstrings for sure.
Having these high quality interactions is at the heart of high quality early childhood development. But men in particular being involved, that's really important for not only young boys, but also young girls to see the nurturing role can actually be undertaken by a male. That's going to be important not only for their experiences and the relationships they form in their life, but also for a more inclusive society.
UniSA is working with the Minderoo Foundation Thrive by 5 Dad's Action Plan to bring about huge change in young children's lives through fathers' involvement and through more early childhood educators in the field. Okay. So one kind of, arm that we're looking at is obviously pushing out kind of video and support and social media stuff, and just trying to get the message out that men can be involved in children's lives, full stop. I think that's an amazing message that I can't believe we have to keep saying it, but we have to keep saying it. We have to keep saying it because our role is so important. What I want to highlight is that there's no one single solution here to be able to fix all of the low numbers of males working in early childhood education, but it's an ongoing kind of war, I guess, and we're winning small battles here and there. Marketing campaigns like that are one good way. There's lots of other great things that happen in those spaces. I'm going to show you something that I'm really excited about in a moment, which I'm calling the National Charter for Men in Early Childhood Education and Care. We should target career pathways, but I often think that by the time we get to high school kids and they're making their decisions about life, it's probably too late. Some will change and make that decision, but we need to have male educators around them earlier so that they can see those powerful role models. We should be looking at, and this is a contentious thing, right, some scholarships or internships or additional monies to support men to choose that career pathway. That's a bit contentious because men do quite well in society. So yeah, while we can try the KFC model and use what other industry is doing, it might not work for the early childhood sector, which is a largely female-dominated space, obviously. Support networks, like thriving as male educators, support networks that we are building today, that we have built for years before, that will continue in a range of different ways, are one of the most critical things. Support networks help us to feel okay about the job we're doing. Hearing Anthony tell us that we are good enough, hearing Anthony tell us that what we do matters and that there is only one you. Some of that network and hearing those voices from other people is the most powerful stuff that might be just what you need on the day where it's the worst day of your life. We've all had them, right? I've sat in a car park at the end of a relief day teaching in a school and cried my eyes out because I just had no relationship with those children. And how could I in one day of teaching? But in those moments, you need to know that there's that safety net, that support, those people around you that you can reach out to, that you can say, hey, absolutely terrible day. Do you want to have a chat? Whatever. And sometimes as blokes say, do you want to have a beer if you've got someone nearby, or whatever it happens to be to get you through. But we need those support networks. And today, I'm so happy that today has happened, because this is one of those moments where we can start to build a range of support networks. Obviously, the pay, the conditions, the things we're asked to do in education is just building and building, and the pay is not what it should be. But that's an ongoing fight that we need to be advocating and trying to change. As I said, the Charter for Men in Early Childhood Education is something I've been thinking about for a number of years. I've spoken to some guys in the UK, and they've got a similar sort of thing, or had a similar sort of thing. I've been speaking to Sam Page and the people in the Thrive by 5 space, and getting this idea kind of socialised. And I'm happy to say at the moment that Early Childhood Australia are kind of looking at how we can work together in this space, and the idea of it. A charter is essentially something that sets out what our rights and privileges are. So I'm thinking about this as possibly something that could exist in a whole range of centres and settings, framed in the foyer where families can see it, but just to say that they are supporting male educators in their service. The language, of course, is really important. And obviously with Early Childhood Australia and the Rainbow Family space, gender is a really important thing to use the right language. So we've been finessing it and trying to work with it. But as much as we are encompassing all genders, we really need to also focus on men and the lack of men. I mean, you saw probably the figures for non-binary educators is even worse, right? But you can only fight one battle at a time, and this battle is mine at the moment, is about men and a whole range of gender diversities and other diversities in our spaces. But we're hoping that this is something that might just be part of that initiative that kind of changes people's perceptions when they walk into an early learning centre and see, okay, this centre supports and you know, values our male educators, not just as a picture in their posters, but messages and the way they act and the way a centre feels as well. So part of the process. Really excited. Keep your eyes on this space. Again, if you're interested in connecting and working along with me in this area, please reach out. I will provide my email on this slide as well. My main message, and I say this in lots of spaces, you can't be what you can't see. If young boys grow up not seeing a male educator in their space, if young girls don't see powerful, high-quality male educators demonstrating what it means to be a good human being, then you can't actually change the world very much. They need to see us in there. Young children deserve access to a diverse teaching workforce, a diverse range of adults around them that reflects their identities. But also, you and I, as male educators, we need to feel supported in our work. We need to see our identities reflected in our teams. We need to say, hey, there is another male educator down the road. This is why I was sad that Adam didn't get to speak. I don't know how he got 13 male educators in the centre. You know, you're lucky if you get 1 or 2 or 3, massive. But anyway, he can talk about that at some other point, I'm sure. I'd love to hear about it. My main message here, together we can thrive. We're not just going to survive. We need to actually help each other out, and we can do this together through thriving as male educators, but also in a whole range of ways that, you know, I'm keen to support any of you with. That's my details. Feel free to reach out. I think I've gone right to the right time, Ramesh. So yeah, thank you everyone for listening. And yeah, so happy to be with you today.
Thank you so much, Martin. Like, you are incredible, especially with the advocacy that you have done for the sector and for male educators in particular. Like, Martin is the guy that I go to when I have to pick brains, get ideas, and have questions. So it's an honor to have you here, and we would like to collaborate in the future. Anything that you need from us, feel free to reach out, and we'll do the same.
Excellent. Thanks, Ramesh.
Awesome. Next, we have another great educator, a male mentor. An anecdote with Ralph. So he was the first speaker for our Thriving as Male Educators Conference, but he did not know that because I did not tell him. I sort of took the liberty, and when I was presenting in the admin group, I was like, "Hi, Ralph. I know you have 40 years of experience. You started when you were 15, and you have had this long journey of 40 years. So I thought it would be great to share that, and I have put you as a speaker." He laughed and he was like, "Fine, I'll do it." So he has been there since the start of this idea, and every fortnight he has been putting inputs. He has some great suggestions. He is like an elder brother in our group, so we are always looking forward to his stories. What's happened? What has happened this week? What are your stories? So he's a person that I really look up to. So please join me in welcoming Ralph, an incredible educator and a great group admin and organizer, fellow organizer.
Thank you, Ramesh, for your kind words. I too have a PowerPoint presentation on a different, I suppose, speed to those that have come before me. So I'm just going to share that with you now. Tell me if you can see that. Yep, awesome. So I probably would like to start with an acknowledgement of country as well. I'm coming to you from the Whadjuk Noongar land in Perth, Western Australia, and would also like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I think I attended an ECA conference in WA about 2 or 3 years ago, and there was a speaker there that I was watching, and she mentioned that we did this exercise, and she talked about, when we give that acknowledgement of country, we quite often use the words like past, present, and emerging. But she highlighted the fact that, when we're talking about, leaders of the past within the Aboriginal community, we sometimes think that it's not just the people that have, died maybe, that have passed like 5 years ago or 10 years ago or 15 years ago, but in actual fact that the Aboriginal people have been on this land, and we've had elders passing on information and sharing their skills in raising children and caring for the land for 60,000 years. And I think so when we stop to think about our acknowledgement, and when we offer that that particular phrase about past, present and future, we need to consider that this information that we are privileged to share in and to receive is based on 60,000 years worth of knowledge that's being passed down through their people and their teachings. I have been in early childhood for 40 years. I don't know whether that makes me a dinosaur. Children like dinosaurs, so I suppose that works for me in that respect. My talk today is probably going to be based more on around what I suppose what my career path in terms of that 40 years, and that probably highlighting the fact that there can be diversity and still remain within the early childhood sector. For me, it was kind of a complete circle in that I started working with children, and 40 years later, after doing a raft of different things in which I'm going to highlight to you, I have come back to working in the centre as a centre director and working with children on a daily basis. So with that in mind, I've got up pictures of my or various versions of me, I suppose, throughout the years. The little boy that you can see there is me as a 5-year-old. As a 5-year-old, I actually attended the Lady Gowrie Childcare Centre, which will have some relevance for you in a minute. But I think that was my first kind of introduction into early childhood education and care, I suppose. And then you can see on the other side there is a picture of me in the stylish brown, cardigan. It was the 70s. Well, actually, it was the 80s, so there you go. But that was me as a 13-year-old. This is actually at my cousin's birthday party, and even as a 13-year-old, I was running a mat session. So it kind of said to me, and I'm holding a baby at the same time. So it kind of said to me that A, I could multitask, even though I was a male, and B, I was probably destined to work with children in some capacity moving forward. Is this not working? Okay. So I'm going to speak to you today probably through the job titles that I've had over the years. My first window into education and care, and I'm going to refer to it as education and care because I've worked both in outside school hours care and in long day care as well throughout my career. But my first window into education and care was I had an athletics teacher. I did little athletics as a child, and I had a little athletics coach who became a very close family friend of ours in the future. But I met him prior to 1984. But in 1984, I was 15, I think, at the time. I just turned 15, and it was coming up to a holiday program, and we were also heading down south to an athletics meet. And Bruce, my coach, was going to be taking me down there because my parents weren't able to get off work that late, and so they were going to follow down the next day. But I had to go to work with Bruce, and Bruce at that time was studying teaching. He was studying high school teaching, but working in an outside school hours care service, and doing vacation care to obviously pay the bills and to fund his teaching career. And so I had to go to work with him on a vacation care program one day. And that one day that I spent there kind of, I suppose, was the first inkling that I maybe would have an opportunity to work with children. I should probably backstep. In year 10, because I was in year 10 that year, we had to decide what our careers were going to be moving forward so that we could select subjects for year 11 and 12. And I had a career guidance counsellor who was, 400-year-old male English teacher, and he suggested to me, because I wanted to be an early childhood teacher, and he had said to me, I'm working pre-primary, and he had said to me, oh no, you're going to have to pick something else. He said men aren't allowed to work with children under the age of 8. And I went, oh, so what do I do now? This is what I wanted to do. This is what I already worked out that I wanted to work in that path. So having, going along to this vacation care program kind of gave me that sense that I was going to be able to still work with children, but just in a different way. I love the title. My first job was working at the city of Kalamunda, or for the city of Kalamunda, a local council. And I was taken on initially as a volunteer, and then was paid at the end of a 4-week stint. And that was at the end of 1984 and the beginning of 85, over a Christmas holiday program. And so that was 4 weeks, and that was my first introduction, I suppose, into paid work into this sector. And I had an absolutely wonderful time. I then went on to work. I went into year 11, obviously, in 85, and decided that I obviously wasn't going to be able to become a teacher because I've been given this terrible advice. And so applied for a job with my local council, which was the city of Stirling, in one of their vacation care programs. And so there's a picture of me dressed as a clown at one of those particular programs on one of those days during my first job with City of Stirling, and that would have been around about the May holidays, I think it was, in 85. It was also the year that I started my first certificate in early childhood, and that was a certificate 3 in play leading. I love the term play leading. I was a play leader. That was my job title. That was on the top of my check when I got it. And I thought that was a true identification of what we were actually doing, in that space as well. Part of my qualification in play leading was that I had a unit that was around clowning. One of my lecturer was a professional clown, and we had 10 weeks worth of clown school, essentially, which was all about play. It was all about, developing trust and relationships and all those sorts of things. And it was amazing how he was able to use this, this theme of clowning and be able to build those relationships and so on and so forth. Just move on a little bit. My next role, probably about 5 years later, was that I became a caregiver, so an assistant caregiver. And this is where it tracks back to me being a 5-year-old at Lady Gowrie. My first role in early childhood was working at the Lady Gowrie Centre in Western Australia. They had been around since 1938. And here I was, in 1990, I think it was, I started there. And I was an assistant educator working in that space. Now, it was interesting that Lady Gowrie had had a male educator working for them since about 1980. And I replaced a male educator, and when I left, a male educator took over my position. And there was a couple of other males working there while I was working there as well, casually. But it was a bit of a pioneer, the Lady Gowrie, in that we were, they always recognised that space needed a male role model for children to learn and also to flourish. The Lady Gowrie Centre was situated in a low socioeconomic area or neighbourhood. We had a diverse range of families were using our service. Some lived across the road in the posh, multi-million-dollar suburb, and others lived, in our suburb where, people didn't have cars and they walked everywhere and, wondered, from day to day how they were going to feed their families. And so it was an interesting place to work. It was also the space, and I've used the quote there, awesome, a male educator or a male teacher is what I was called. I had a young family at the beginning of the year. I was placed in the 3 to 4 year old room. And so we had 35 children a day in that room. And I had a mum walk in the first week or two that we were of the year, and she walked up to me and she said to me, "Are you working here?" And I said, "Yes, I'm an assistant caregiver in this space." And she said to me, "Oh, that's amazing, or awesome, a male teacher." And I said, "Oh, why do you say that?" And she said, "Well, I was wondering how I was going to get my son, her 4-year-old, how I was going to get my son to learn how to pee standing up." And I said to her, "Well, I'm not too sure if I'm going to actually demonstrate that to him, but I'm more than happy to help with the mechanics of it all." So that was, I suppose, a very positive, reaction or to me being a male educator. But having said that, like I said, I was also working in that space that it had male educators working there before. I started to get my second qualification at that stage, and so that was an associate diploma in social science. So at the time, that was the equivalent, or I use the word equivalent to the diploma. The current diploma has got nothing on what that particular course taught me. I had units. Getting into that course was interesting, and I think this speaks to sort of like where we've gone in terms of what we're willing to accept in terms of educators working in this space with children. I had to have at least a minimum pass level of C at school. I had to submit an essay to apply for the course. I had to sit a 3-hour exam that was based on some psychoanalytic stuff and some communication skills and so on and so forth. And then if you pass that, I then had to be interviewed in front of a panel of TAFE experts as well as industry or sector experts as well. And there were 6 of us in front of a panel. If you got through that stage, you were then offered a place in the course. The year I started, there were 1,500 people applying for 27 positions in a part-time caregiving course, or the Associate Diploma in Social Science. I was working full-time, so studied at night time. We went to class 2 days a week for 4 hours each night for 4 years to get that qualification because we were working full-time. When I started studying, I was the only male in the group out of the 27 people that were in the room. And I was, I received a really welcomed kind of, or a kind welcome into the group, except for the fact that I was working at the Lady Gowrie Centre. And at the time, back in the 90s and the 80s, the Lady Gowrie Centre had a really, really high reputation within the sector here in Western Australia. And so if you got an opportunity to work at the Lady Gowrie Centre, you were considered to be, quite a good educator and be in a good position. So I was getting death stares, but it wasn't because I was a male educator. It was more because I was working at the Lady Gowrie Centre at the time. Sorry if my voice fails me. I've actually just come off a week of sick leave with a chest infection, so I'm going to try and power through. I spent 7.5 years working at Gowrie, and then completed my studies. During that time, I was assistant caregiver. I took over a role as a qualified caregiver and ran a room for a couple of years, and then eventually left that space to go on to TAFE and lecture in early childhood. So at the time, it was called Diploma in Children's Services Childcare, and I spent a bit of time initially wondering, it was still, back then I felt like I was the only educator or male educator in that space. I mean, other than the couple that I had met while I was working at there were no others. There was one guy in my class that I'd studied with, but he didn't go on to working in the sector. He moved overseas as soon as he got his qualification. Eventually came back, but didn't actually go on to work in the sector. But I was starting to think about, like, what do people think about males working in early childhood at that time? And I got my job. My initial job was a 6-month contract working at TAFE, and I was employed by someone who was actually taking over or caretaking the role of manager of that particular unit. And I got on, really well with that person, moving forward. Post that, the person that was held that position had returned, and her thinking was that males actually had no part in working with children. She felt that they couldn't be caring and nurturing, that they couldn't, and that they were, potentially, a threat to other, educators who may have had, trauma in their past in terms of working with men. I, of course, didn't agree with that assessment, but it did make it very difficult working in that space for the next 3 years, because I knew that, my boss didn't particularly like the gender, or, that I was, and that I didn't really have a place. It was how I was made to feel in that space. I did a survey while I was working there with the local high schools. There was 5 high schools in that space that I surveyed. Primarily, I was surveying the year 10 students who at that point still had to make decisions about what their careers were going to be moving forward. And the year 10 students that I received feedback from, it was interesting that some of the information that came back. Primarily, I was seeking to know what people initially thought about early childhood, whether they were, if they were, boys, would they consider, going into that sector? If not, why not? Those sorts of questions. And it was interesting, the feedback I got. Well, it wasn't interesting. It was probably what I thought I was going to get. You know, I had a lot of boys who turned around and said, well, I didn't even know I could. I didn't know it was something that was an option. A lot of them came back and said, would I? Probably not. I might like to, but I wouldn't because I'm too scared of what my mates are going to say in terms of, you know, working with kids. So it was interesting, some of the feedback that we got back. But one thing that did come to mind was that it was obvious that there was a lot of acceptance for males to be working in that sector, but from males themselves, it wasn't a sector that they would choose to go in and work for a number of reasons. And wages obviously was another one. There was still this perception that as a male educator or as a male in that society, you had to obviously be the breadwinner. And you weren't going to be able to do that if you worked in early childhood, you know, if you know, moving forward. While I was working at TAFE, I was also, because I'm crazy and thought that one full-time job wasn't enough, I also started working in an OSH service again as the coordinator. So running a full-time after-school care program and vacation care program alongside my lecturing, which was, you know, day and night. So that was a tiring time for me, but certainly very interesting as well. And there you can see me standing next to a group of children fishing. And I think this also kind of talks to the nature of what we do and how things have changed over the years. Like, you know, back in those days, we used to take the children to the beach. And like I'd take a group of 50 children with 5 educators to the beach for the day. Yes, we were worried about sunburn and sun cream and all those sorts of things, but you know, as long as one person had a bronze medallion, we were fine. Whereas now, you know, the risk assessments and the this and the that and the documentation that I have to complete to take those children to the beach would mean that I didn't end up taking them to the beach. But fishing was obviously a great pastime for us as well. I moved into management at the end of my lecturing stint. I took an opportunity to go and work in a coastal town, which was about 4.5 hours out of Perth, called Albany. I took on the role as Children's Services Manager, and it was interesting because when I first moved down to Albany, I had family or friends that I knew down there, but I didn't really know people or the lay of the land. I knew that, you know, Albany at that time was still considered a small town with some kind of small town mentalities. But I was well received when I first went into the service that I was working in, or where my office was based. I was the Children's Services Manager, which meant that I was there to obviously run and operate a long daycare service, but also I was there in terms of, you know, questions and supporting the town, I suppose, in early childhood. I went along to my first. They used to have these director meetings with some of the private services and the other occasional care services in town, and I went along to my first one, and I walked through the door and there was a lady sitting at the very end of a very long table who had she was just dripping in gold, and she was just sat there like the queen at the end of this table. And as I walked in, I was a little bit late, and there was that everyone else was seated, and there was one spot left at the well, there was a couple of spots left, but one was at the other end of the table. And I walked in and she said to me, "Oh," she said, "you must be the male educator that's now working for the City of Albany." And I went, yep. I said, "What gave me away?" And she said to me, she said, "Oh, I think it was very brave of the City of Albany to employ a male to run their centre." And I kind of thought from that moment on that I was going to face some adversity with this group. But I sat down at the other end of the table, collected myself and said to her, "Well, I'm not sure about whether it was a brave, but I think it was a very sound decision for them to make." moving forward. They obviously chose the best person for the job, and I know there was about 40 applicants. So here I am, and here I am to stay. So from Albany, I moved back up to Perth 5 years later. I was there on a 5-year plan because I wanted to experience different things in the early childhood sector. And I moved out of the service at that point and then moved into I went back to the Lady Gary for 12 months and worked as their quality assurance manager and on a national program under the older RAP system, and also ran their RTO for that 12-month period. I left there after 12 months because the thing had changed in the sector, and there was a new program out there that was funded by the federal government called the Professional Support Coordinator Program, which changed the way that everything was going to be funded. And I was headhunted by a group called Ruxin, which was the resource unit for children with special needs. However, they had won the national contract to run the PSC and get it started. And I was headhunted to go and work for them and basically be the project manager to get that program up and running. And that was, again, an interesting time. Lots of challenges, but also lots of really excitement. It gave me an opportunity to engage with people all over Western Australia and to kind of, I suppose, to me, represent who I was and, you know, what I could bring to the table in terms of education, but also from that male perspective. We got that program up and running within about a month or two, and then got offered the Northern Territory to open as well. They weren't able to find an organisation to run it. They were impressed with how we had engaged and got WA up and running in that space. And so I then had to project manage getting the Northern Territory space up and running too. And Ruxin eventually became Child Australia, and I'm not sure if many of you have heard of Child Australia, but they do have quite a heavy presence in the Northern Territory and also here in Western Australia as well. After a couple of years of doing that, I moved on to consultancy. So I left work, started up my own consultancy business, and did that for about 4.5 years. It was great. I got opportunities to travel all over Western Australia, all over the Northern Territory, meet people, you know, and learn and share in community as well. There's a picture of me standing outside of Uluru, and that was one of my highlights, I suppose, to my career at that point, in that I was given an opportunity to fly into Yalara, which is the township that sits outside of Uluru, and speak to a group of early childhood educators, and work with them for 2 or 3 days. The director at that service had just started there and had previously worked within the communities of that space for 10 years. And so took me on a little bit of an expedition into a community where it was a locked community at the site of where the old Ayers Rock campsite was that poor Azaria Chamberlain was taken by dingo from. It was now an Aboriginal, you know, locked community, and I had to seek permission to get in because I was male. They then had to seek permission for me to enter the women's space, which was the community centre that sat in the middle of that campsite, and it was surrounded by that, you know, 9-foot high fences with barbed wire. And sadly, it was done that way because it was a safe space for women and children to be able to enter should things go wrong in the community. And so again, I had to seek permission, obviously, to be allowed in as well. So there were many highlights to being able to share space. I used to do these massive road trips where I would, fly into Alice Springs, on a Monday night. I'd give a quick lecture. I then fly off to Darwin, the following morning, work within centres and communities, throughout the day, and then get on another plane and fly to the next spot. So I've been able to go to places like Jabiru and Groot Island, Nhulunbuy, a whole pile of amazing places where I've managed to see and connect with a bunch of amazing educators along the way. In terms of advocacy, I have always been quite passionate about getting involved. And as Ramesh said earlier, I have served as a committee member on the ECEC committee or branch committee. I was actually employed by them for a 6-month period, for a 12-month period to do some administration work and so on and so forth. I was the co-founder of ELA, which is the Educational Leaders Association. And that was formed initially in 2015. And through that role was the president for 4.5 years and spent a lot of time through COVID chatting with people and educators and educational leaders across Australia on a weekly basis. We ran weekly sessions just to keep connecting with people and supporting people through that time around, how they were supporting children through those scary moments as well. I've been the vice chair of Care West previously. I've been a committee member of Care West for most of my career, and I'm now currently the vice chair of Care West again. And I'm also the chairperson for this South Metropolitan TAFE advisory group, which is a group of directors and advocates for early childhood that oversee the new units. So like when the courses start to be renewed, the diploma and the Cert 3, we look at the units, we advise on, which ones need reviewing and updating and how that goes. They rewrite them and then we give our feedback and then we also support South Metropolitan TAFE to make decisions on which units they choose from their electives and their cores. I'm also a lead delegate for the United, well, it's not United Voice anymore, it's the United Workers Union in early childhood here in Western Australia. And so, and have really, enjoyed that work as well. That finally brings me to my last slide, which is as a director. I went back to being a director in late 2010. When I took over a service from a private that had gone into receivership, and I opened it up under Child Australia's banner, which is a not-for-profit. I've predominantly worked in not-for-profit community-based services and as a director all of my career. This is a picture of me and my admin staff and my cook celebrating, obviously, Purple Bra Day. So I take myself with a pinch of salt. I put myself out there. What you see is what you get. And throughout my time as a director, I suppose I spent time, trying to support an equitable and kind, caring work environment. My focus has always been heavily on pedagogy, so I spend time in the rooms as much as possible. I did have a workplace accident when I was in 2017 and actually thought my career in early childhood was going to have to end. I was being told by doctors and so on and so forth that my back injury was so bad that I was never actually going to be able to work on the floor again. you know, potentially not able to walk again. But, you know, I didn't listen to them. I knew what I could do and I knew what I wanted to do moving forward. So I still today, even though my still, you know, pains me sometimes and my legs and knees give out, I still work in the rooms at least, you know, a little part of every day that I go to work. So yeah, that's it. Thank you, Ramesh, for allowing me to share my story.